Welcome, comrades, to the Red Barrels podcast, episode 22. I've decided, this is a little editorial note, I've decided that from now on I will open with hello, comrades, a kind of obvious thing I should have been doing for literally a whole year, and it only occurred to me maybe 20 minutes before we started this. But yeah, that's the dynamic.
That's until we come up with like a fan name, right? I guess.
Yeah.
The our little red barrel explosions.
The redheads.
Redheads. Barrel heads.
It's our redheads.
I mean, I think
the barrel
comrades is
rolls.
probably an okay nickname for them. It's accurate, unless we've got some traitors listening in. And of course we do. We all know that the security services are monitoring our podcasts, and we say, "I bring it on. Well, I welcome them. Well, maybe we'll give them some good game recommendations." I think our hardworking boys at MI5 deserve that, surely. But
That's not the official Red Barrels line.
hopefully, none of us are working for MI5. I'll say that for now. I'm not.
For now.
But let's find
they
out.
pay me enough.
Who our other potential traitors are. Who's joining me?
I'm Ed, and I'm 100% faithful. Thanks for coming back for this wonderful episode. Number 22. I know you've all been waiting for it, and it's finally here.
It's a new year. It's a new year, and Ed's been watching The Traitors, apparently.
I have. It's a new year. It's a new me. It's a new season of The Traitors. And more importantly, it's Ed, it's Alex, and...
It's Sofie. We'll see if I'm 100% faithful. Whoever offers me more money, at the end of the day, I'm not unwilling to compromise on all of my views in the name of capital. So that's a joke. That is a joke, to be clear.
I mean, I think merely by doing this podcast, we are essentially advertising ourselves to, again, the security services or maybe other countries' security services, or just the forces of capital in general, that we're up for grabs. We're for the right price, we'll sell out. But no one's been offering yet. That's kind of a bit sad.
Well, they've not been offering the
Isn't
right
it?
price. Obviously, we've got lots and lots of offers, but the price is too low. So don't lowball us.
That's true. That's good point. We're very much in demand, but we're holding out. But yeah, Happy New Year. It's New Year's 2026. And you know what that means? There's only one way we can start a new year.
Alex,
and that is with another round of Who Would Mark's Main?
Oh, shit.
Yeah, you thought you were out of it. You thought you were out of it. No, today we are playing Who Would Mark's Main.
No.
And this is, and I'm going to say,
again.
it's going to be an extra hard episode of
But
Who
they're
Would Mark's
always
Main.
hard.
Because this is an episode tinged with sadness and regret. Because that's right, we are finding out who Marks would main, or would have mained. I wouldn't say mained. He wouldn't maim anyone. He's a good person, Marks. So maybe, the capitalist. He might maim a capitalist. But who he would main in the defunct Sony game Concord.
I knew it was
That's right.
Be Concord.
We're playing in a game that you can't even play anymore. That was shut down after 2 weeks or whatever? Over a year ago in September of 2024. That's right. I felt that, we had to get it on record who Marks would have mained in that.
Are they characters?
And to fully put him in. Yes, there are characters. I will be very generous and give you a link to a list of the characters.
We don't need a link. We can
It's not on the Wikipedia page.
I think that he would
I think you would main that guy in the thumbnail of this thing because
he would
he's red.
name one off.
And has a beard.
Because that's the first one that comes up when you scroll through it.
No, it's because he's a
red
robot.
And he has a beard.
And Marx
that's
predicted
a different character. One of
the
his
rise.
a yellow
Excuse
robot.
me, I'm responding to your terrible
It's
prompt.
talking.
It's because one off is a
Go
robot, and Marx predicted the rise of automation in his Grundrisse. So that's why he game recognizes game.
Very nice.
I mean, I feel like you put in the absolute minimum effort there because you literally chose the first character that comes up when you scroll down.
I've seen other ones. I was going to make a point. There's one called the Duchess, and you wouldn't mean that one because he's not a fan of the aristocracy. Happy now?
Okay.
Alex?
All right.
You son of a gun.
Okay, I'm taking your suggestion under advisement. Sofie, who do you think Marks would main in the defunct video game Concord? The immediately defunct Concord.
Think he would main Starchild? Is that a Guardians of the Galaxy reference?
Maybe it was very Guardians of the Galaxy coded, this game, from the little I saw of it.
2010. Ew.
Took them a while to make it, I guess. But suffice to say, they completely missed the zeitgeist and the game folded.
Yeah,
So
I
you're
think
saying
he'd remain
Star
Star
Child
because they have a very similar beard.
Well, I
Very
mean,
similar shape.
A beard.
I'd say
I
it's
wouldn't say
quite a
it's
similar shape-ish. And his face is red.
His face is
and
red.
that is the color of communism, as we know.
True. But
and also
body,
stars are also associated
that's true.
with communism.
I will say his
and
body.
Also children.
His body is blue.
Doesn't
which
matter.
Which is the color of conservatism. Capital.
Yeah, well, it's
so that
a metaphor.
Would suggest, he's red and blue, which suggests he's a centrist, which we wouldn't like, and certainly Marx wouldn't.
His face is red. That's the most forerunning part of the character.
Are you
I don't know, man.
that
I have never even heard of this game in my life before, so I'm really at a loss. I'm going to be honest.
Are you suggesting that because the blue body represents that you have to work through capitalism as a midpoint before socialism from feudalism? Is that what you're suggesting the character is communicating, Sophie?
I'm saying that he's mostly blue because, that's the system.
Because sometimes you just gotta be blue.
Sometimes that's just... Sometimes
the blue strikes.
Yeah. You
can't. I'm picking up what you're putting down, Sophie. I think that's a good point.
Sometimes you're just feeling blue,
Go on,
Maybe
Alex.
he's feeling blue because of capitalism.
Sure.
Nice.
He's feeling a little blue.
Well, I'm not going to say you aren't both considered theoreticians on these matters.
Is it because Lark is the correct answer?
You've thought about it. And you know what, Ed? You're right. Lark is the correct answer.
Yeah. I was just testing
Lark?
you. Because Lark's a fungus. Lark's a fungus, and underneath the surface of the earth, they have all kinds of complicated...
network.
Exactly.
That's right. See, me and Ed, we're on the same wavelength, or more accurately, Ed is on the correct wavelength, which I am on. So I'm sorry you couldn't work that out, Sophie. But also, Lark's first ability is a transplant pod, which works as a teleporter. I just think Marx would like a teleport. I think that's pretty clear from the Marxist.
To be fair, I would as well. So I guess that makes Mark, Carl, and I pretty similar, honestly.
Also, Lark is an anagram for Carl.
True.
Need I say more? We
got it. I think
that's conspiratorial.
This is as a locked down theory as we've ever presented on this podcast. And I mean, it's not a theory; it's clearly fact.
Not even just in who would Marx made, but
that's factual.
Overall, that was the most cogent thing this podcast has ever contained.
True, very true, very true. Well, if you're ready to completely destroy any sense of cogency, we're going to start talking about the games we've been playing. And first up, it's going to be Sophie with, I'm going to say, a pretty contentious game.
Yep.
Don't worry, we're definitely not endorsing this game, to be clear.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be talking about Hogwarts Legacy.
Boo!
Boo! Boo! Boo! Everyone, boo! You better be booing as well, listener. Boo! Even if you're outside in public, I expect you to just boo loudly right now and confuse everyone around you. So yes, I decided to play Hogwarts Legacy. I have played it before, but I basically played it again because it recently became free on Epic Games, which I will explain a little bit about. But before, and even that, basically at the top of this segment, I'd like to address the very obvious controversy of covering this game. First and foremost, J.K. Rowling has been heavily and rightly criticized for several years over her deplorable and non-stop views regarding trans people, often using so-called, and I'm using mock quotation marks here, feminist ideology to encourage hate campaigns against trans folks. I think I speak for all of us when I say that I do not recommend interacting with products associated with her and the world of Harry Potter in any way, shape, or form. Full stop. Rowling has made it explicitly clear that she uses money that she earns from the franchise directly to fund her hatred for trans people, and therefore I do not condone participating in the Harry Potter fandom in any capacity, whether that's visiting the landmarks, buying the merchandise, going to paying money to see the movies, or even seeing an orchestra play music alongside I don't care. I think all of that is crossing the picket line as far as I'm concerned. I say this as an ex-Potterhead, to be transparent. I grew up with the novels, the audiobooks, and the movies. I was the prime target age for this property, as I grew up almost exactly alongside the titular Harry Potter character. That being said, nostalgia is not a good enough reason to engage with a fandom that is created and monetized by a transphobe who has absolutely no interest in self-reflection or human rights in any meaningful sense. So, got that out the way. Are we all in agreement with that? Yes?
Yes, I'm
yes?
sure we all agree. I will say, I think it's okay to maybe go to some of the landmarks. I did go to King's
don't
Cross
go to King's
Station
Cross.
earlier.
Don't go there. Don't
Not allowed
to
go to Scotland anymore.
Don't go to Scotland. Don't get on trains, because trains feature heavily in the movie.
True,
Don't get on trains.
That's bad news for socialists, right? So that's a real conflict.
But at least we're banning Fords
okay, I mean, landmarks, I suppose. But don't pay money to see that, because I think you can go pay money to like have your picture taken by like the 9 3/4.
Yeah,
don't
I have to say,
do that.
I apologize. I did take a train through King's Cross a week or two ago, and I did see there was a big queue of tourists outside of to go stand outside a brick wall that looks like every other brick wall in the fucking world.
Yes. Just find a red brick building, you'll be fine. But also don't. Like, also grow up. Get a different franchise, all right? And again, I say this as an ex-Harry Potter fan, so like I don't think it's not without sympathy that I'm like, grow up, read a different book, all right? I will help you. I work at a bookshop. I'll help you read a different book if you'd like. Yeah. So getting back to the game, Hogwarts Legacy was developed by Avalanche Software and published by Warner Brothers Games, was the long-awaited at the time 2023 open-world action RPG adaptation of millennial favorite franchise Harry Potter. For years, fans had expressed a desire for a video game set in the world of Harry Potter, not to roleplay as Harry Potter himself, but to instead experience the fantasy of going to Hogwarts and feeling like a part of the wizarding world, which is a fantasy I myself was also really interested in experiencing, obviously, before we abandoned the fandom, as I'm sure we all did. When this game came out, I talked about it numerous times on Twitch, where I regularly stream, because of the enormous controversy surrounding those who decided to play or boycott the game. I don't know if you guys remember, but on Twitch, or if you were aware of it, but on Twitch specifically, some people basically had like hate raids if they played the game, or hate raids if they were boycotting the game. Sure. People had very, very strong opinions about playing this game. I openly condemned buying the game and playing the game on and off stream, and I still stand by that opinion. I was, however, honest about having played the game offline, having acquired it by other means. I'll let you know what that means. I mean, I'll let you figure out what that means. Recently, the game became available for free on Epic Games, basically, I think in December last year. So I thought it was right to finally share my opinions on this game, in case you're thinking about picking it up, or if you have picked it up, or whatever, if it ever crosses your dashboard, Thought I'd let you know my thoughts, of which there are many. In short, don't bother. In short, don't bother with this game. It's set in the 1890s. The game has you create your very own 16-year-old witch or wizard with optional binary pronouns and gendered dorms. So you can choose your binary pronouns and you can choose which dorm you end up in, who has arrived at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry in their 5th year, which is an exceedingly rare occurrence. The game makes a frequent point to illustrate to you. This, like, multiple characters will point this out to you. It's really very repetitive. This is because you're special. You're so special. A once-in-a-generation witch or wizard capable of interacting with and casting capital A, capital M, ancient magic.
Wow.
The game features several beats that are deliberately created in such a way as to, like, recreate visually scenes from the books and the movie franchises, including the game starts after a sequence at Gringotts Bank, just like the first movie book, breaking into the restriction section of the library, just like the first book, and I think also the second book, taming and riding hippogriffs, troll and dragon fights, and a life or death battle against the forces of evil, all kind of very deliberately created to evoke feelings and adventures from the original stories. The game plays typical action role-playing fare with third-person perspective, spell casting skill trees, which you could sort of level up as you gain experience, a customizable room of requirement headquarters, main and side quests, collectibles, and open world exploration. Battles are quite fun, I will be honest, with a fairly well-rendered spell casting and cooldown ability system, as well as QTE dodge and parry prompts. So much so that everything in between fight sequences feels extremely tedious and boring in comparison. That really is probably the most positive thing I have to say about the game, is that the combat is like kind of fun. It's competent, I suppose. The game is attractive. It's got a beautifully rendered Hogwarts castle, kind of hitting all of the iconic locations that are featured in the books and movies, including the Black Lake, the Great Hall, the house dormitories, which they've sort of stylized for each house, whichever one you end up in, the Gothic quad, the wonky wooden bridge, groundkeeper's hut, all the things that you might really distinctly remember from the movies, especially. The rest of the world in comparison, however, feels quite empty and placeholder, just sort of like little English hamlets with usually an interactable shop and boxes that you can loot, which are everywhere. Like, you can break into literally any house in this in this world and steal people's shit from their boxes.
J.K. Rowling endorses that, does she?
Yeah, I assume so. She endorses breaking and entering, obviously.
That's what Alohomora is for.
Pardon? Yeah, exactly. That's what Alohomora is for. You learn Alohomora through an extremely tedious set of quests, of fetch quests, where you have to go and collect things, basically. And then you learn Alohomora, and then you can use that to break into people's houses and steal their stuff, which is really cool. The music is extremely forgettable. It's actually one of the very few games that I really did not like the music. I found it so forgettable, noticeably not good. It's written in such a way as to evoke nostalgia for some of the most memorable tracks of the movie soundtrack, but with absolutely none of the actual memorable qualities of John Williams' prolific compositions.
Mm-hmm.
The voice acting, as well, is average at best, and at times is quite grating with both over and under performances from a variety of characters. So I find it quite frustrating to listen to most of the time. I think there's a couple of sort of standout, pretty good performances. But I'm not going to put anyone under fire here, but I do just generally think it's probably because the direction I also don't think was very good. What I really want to talk about, however, is the plot and the politics of this game. Ostensibly, you as the player character are the protagonist of this story, and yet the overarching plot line of this story is to crush a goblin rebellion. Goblins in the world of Harry Potter are small, magical humanoid beings with long fingers and feet and hooked noses, most prominently featured at the Bank of Gringotts in the books and films. They are capable of performing magic without a wand, despite being legally banned from using them in the world of Harry Potter, and are considered inferior by most wizards who, according to the Harry Potter wiki, quote, foolishly believed that the goblins were comfortable with that arrangement, unquote. It's worth mentioning that J.K. Rowling has also been accused of designing her world's goblins using anti-Semitic tropes, including their appearances as well as their associations with money and moneylending. So also some problematic shit there, which is cool. Ranrock leads a goblin rebellion and is trying to gain the power of ancient magic in order to achieve his goals. You, as the player character, are tasked with using that same ancient magic to fight back, no questions asked, against Ranrock and his ilk. Whilst Ranrock is portrayed as a violent extremist, the game has several both goblin and human characters who sympathize with his motivation to fight against the human oppression of goblins, whilst condemning any attempts to actually do so that even remotely resemble violence. Throughout the course of the video game, you are tasked with murdering henchmen and figures of a rebellion by goblins in response to the discrimination and prejudice they face from the human wizarding world. The way the game vilifies the goblins and their ambitions is purely the ends don't justify the means type argument.
Mm-hmm.
In an effort to thwart this rebellion, your player character can choose to learn the so-called unforgivable curses, including the Imperative Curse Imperio, the Torture Curse Crucio, and the Instant Murder Curse Avada Kedavra, obviously heavily featured in the books and the movies, which I just think is crazy that you can choose to learn them. And the choice not to learn them or to learn all three of the curses are usually presented through compulsory storyline quests as either no, I could never learn such an awful spell, or yes, I will learn the awful spell, but only so that I don't use it. And finally, yes, I will learn the awful spell, and I can't wait to use it on goblins. Just cannot wait to torture goblins.
I mean, you surely you fight other wizard people at some
they
point
don't
in
have
this
it
game.
though. Yeah.
Yeah, but
As far
can
as
you
I
use it on
remember-
them? Can you kill
Yes.
wizards?
Yes, you can kill
Wow.
everyone with and you can torture anyone as well. You can just torture people. I don't think you can torture good NPCs. I think you can only obviously use these curses on characters that the game has deemed that you're sort of have some kind of battle with or kind of antagonistic relationship. You can't just use it on random students, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, probably.
But yes, you can use it on basically anyone, which is just kind of crazy to give you the choice. Which the first time I played the game, I played as a Slytherin because I was like, listen, if I'm going to be crushing a goblin rebellion, I want it to be law accurate. And that was the only way I could kind of play through the game entirely was I was like,
I just decided to play as a genocidal monster,
character.
but shaking my head the whole time so that everyone knows I disagree with it, right?
Yeah, literally. Yeah, that's what I did. I was like, no, I feel bad doing it, so I played as a Slytherin. As you've spoken about previously on the podcast, the game and J.K. Rowling's worldview in general seems to adopt a very black and white, good versus evil view of the world. Evil people such as Voldemort, the main villain from the Harry Potter franchise, and Ranrock, the architect of the Goblin Rebellion in Hogwarts Legacy, are evil seemingly just because. It is an innate part of their character. The most generic enemy in the game is poachers, which I thought was really interesting. Witches and wizards that kidnap the magical fauna in the game, seemingly just because they're mean and greedy. Every evildoer in this video game is completely extracted from any material context, other than that they are the bad guys, and you are, of course, the good guy.
Wait.
This cartoonish...
go ahead. The poachers are the bad guys in this game.
They're like a generic bad guy
of the last 3 Wizarding World films, effectively a poacher. He abducts magical creatures and puts them in his big suitcase.
You're right, yeah.
No, he only does that nicely. He's doing it nicely. They want to go, but they just need to be cajoled.
Yeah.
He's the good one. He's like the good poacher.
The thing is, the mistake that you've made is that he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
so he would never do something evil.
Yeah.
Right? His
I don't know what I was thinking.
No, you fool. You're very silly, but it's okay. I understand. You don't understand how this works. Is that good people do good things and bad people do bad things.
Right.
And if a good person does a bad thing, no, they didn't. That's how that works. And I do genuinely think that that's how J.K. Rowling sees the world. I do think that that's actually why she's sort of so capable of believing herself to be a good person, even though she is so hateful and disgusting regarding trans people, is because I genuinely think that she thinks that she is a good person, that everything she does is that something that a good person would do, that she wouldn't do things that could be considered evil or morally questionable because she's a good person at the end of the day, and her actions don't have that kind of moral complexity. So I do kind of have a specific issue as far as the Harry Potter world is concerned in terms of how I genuinely believe it indicates how J.K. Rowling sees herself and the world. So that there are good people who do good things and bad people who do bad things. But yeah, every evildoer in this game is completely extracted from any material context other than they're the bad guys, you're the good guys. And it's just such a cartoonish and childlike portrayal of morality. And it feels lazy at best and harmful at worst because literally portraying those who would disrupt the status quo in the name of racial justice as just as bad as those who kidnap and torture animals for fun. That's basically the moral compass of this game. There's also something to be said about the very tokenized inclusion of diversity in the game. There is a trans character who is the proprietor of the 3 Broomsticks, a famous location in the franchise, and she is a trans woman. Bizarrely, her name is Serona, which I just think it's either deliberately cruel or just completely stupid to include the word sir in the name of a trans female character. Just seems like either, like I said, bizarre, completely idiotic, or an intentionally mean choice. Kind of difficult to tell.
I wonder if that was like the result of negotiations with J.K. Rowling herself on the basis that they were like, okay, we're getting all this bad buzz about this trans
we have
stuff,
to include this
so
character.
maybe we have a trans character. But J.K. would only allow it if they like knock her down a peg or two or something.
Yeah,
you know,
and it's unfortunate because she's actually quite a nice character as well. I think she is voiced by a trans woman as well, and it's a genuinely a nice character actually. She's extremely minor though, so it doesn't really count. And also, I'd like to point out that like all of the teachers, almost every single teacher, is a person of color, which seems to be an extremely deliberate attempt to sort of diversify the cast, especially because like the actual main kids cast is mostly white kids, and also most of the main adult cast is also mainly white people. So like all the sort of like, you know, background side characters and like when I say very intentional, I mean like it feels like a checklist. Like there is a black teacher, there is a Japanese teacher, there is an Indian teacher, there is a Malaysian teacher, this kind of thing. It just feels very checklist to me, especially because they're all side characters and they aren't fleshed out in any meaningful capacity.
So it is the kind of format of the game that you have like a main story that has the actual protagonist and so on and antagonists in it, and then you also have little classes that you do.
You have classes, where you like learn the spells that you will sort of like upgrade your spell play.
You ever play Bully? The game Bully?
Yes.
That sounds like
and I actually really like Bully.
Bully's good, yeah.
Yeah, I critically evaluate Bully a lot, so it is very similar. The games I remember, the classes in Bully are so much more fun. I remember genuinely enjoying a lot of the mini games for the classes in Bully compared to this one, where they're usually just sort of like cutscenes and QTE events. So even that feels kind of lazy, but I guess a fairly good canon way to include learning spells, you know. But yeah, that's kind of the format of the game. Ultimately, Hogwarts Legacy is a game that fails on almost every level that matters. Mechanically, it's competent, but it's uninspired. It feels like a paint-by-numbers open-world experience that relies entirely on nostalgia and franchise recognition to carry it through tedious gameplay loops. More damningly, the game's political framework reveals itself to be deeply conservative and morally bankrupt, asking players to gleefully suppress an oppressed group's struggle for equality, whilst framing the use of literal torture and murder spells as morally neutral player choices. The fact that this narrative was conceived in a world created by someone who actively campaigns against the rights of marginalized people is not a coincidence. It's a feature. Whether you acquired this game through purchase, as a gift, or through alternative means, the conclusion remains the same. Your time is better spent elsewhere. There are countless games that offer more engaging gameplay, more thoughtful storytelling, and crucially, don't require you to wade through the ideological mire of a franchise that has become inseparable from its creators' bigotry. So save yourself the disappointment and skip this one entirely.
Wow, fair enough.
That is my... fair enough.
No, I do think, I feel like, maybe to like throw a bone to the actual developers, Avalanche, who I've got quite a lot of respect for. They made some good games I've enjoyed over the years. I feel like a lot of the issues you point out are kind of just inevitable consequences of the world that J.K. Rowling built.
Exactly.
And basically, and this is going to be my little rant about this. My theory about why the big problem with the Harry Potter books, other than the more recent proclivities of the writer, is essentially the whole point of that Harry Potter books was, and because I'm a little older, they were coming out when I was in school. I was a bit too old for them. Like they were more like, if I'd been like a year or two younger, I'd be like lining up perfectly with them. But
I lined up perfectly with the movies.
Yeah. But the whole thing was like every year there'd be a new book, and all the kids would be a year older, and all the readers would be a year older, so you could grow up with the books. That was the whole kind of point of them. And really, the kind of one thing that J.K. Rowling did that was like novel and unique and like a real seller. That's basically I think the real reason they were a big success. Because I remember at the time you just see like every year more and more people would care about these books. Like I'd never heard of them until like book 3. I literally never heard the name Harry Potter. And the thing is, when she writes the first book, she is writing a book about effectively children. I mean, I think they're like 12, maybe they just turned 13 or whatever.
They're 11.
They're 11.
Or 11 even, yeah. They're children. They're unambiguously children. And it's a book for children. And so it's full of like very kind of Roald Dahl-esque kind of things in it. Like
simplicity.
Yeah, like, his parents are his adopted parents are kind of abusive. They keep him in a room under the stairs. He's kind of almost comically mistreated by them. And you've got things like Slytherin. There's an entire house in this school that's literally the evil house, and they're just evil, and that's it. Don't worry about it. They tolerate having an evil a quarter of all wizard children going to school
fash house,
just being evil, and like apart from them, maybe Snape question mark. All the teachers disagree with it
as well.
But exactly. They all disagree with it, but they're just like, well, I guess we just have to have the evil house. And then, that's a fine thing for a Roald Dahl book for a 10-year-old. But the thing is, the books go on, and by the end of them, they're for like the kids are 18, 19, the readers are 18, 19, they're adults. But they're still set in the same world that J.K. Rowling did not think forward on. So things like, okay, what if there are these bankers and they're going to be like big nosed goblins, and I'm not really going to examine that very far. And I'm not saying that should have been in it from the start, but like that kind of like very tropey thing, even if you remove the racial elements from it, is fairly well suited to a kid's book. But like by the time you get to an adult's book, that just feels weird. And so that dissonance is at the heart of, I think, a lot of the political problems within Harry Potter, where it starts off as a very simplistic world because it is for children, and by the end she's had to inject complexity because otherwise it'd be ridiculous. But every time she does that, it just, because it had this kind of rotten core at it, the basis is shaky. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I want to add, like, to that point that, like, the reason the politics in this game are so jarring is because it is targeted towards adults, essentially. Yeah. It's clearly made to be kid-friendly, but I think it's probably a fair assumption, assumption to say that it was targeting millennials, especially, but people who had enjoyed this game. And that's why you play as a 16-year-old, is because that's kind of the oldest that they can get away with and have you still in school. Otherwise, they would have started you off in first year. You just would have been a hero child. But that's the thing, is like, as you say, it has this problem of the world is just kind of made for children and morally incomplex. And the game is kind of aimed at adults, but has this very childlike view of the world. And it feels like The Sims 4, another game I've been very fond of on this podcast. That's a joke. Where it feels very like kitty gloves, which is really baffling because it's an adult world mostly, where it's like, why this is such a strange, jarring mix of tones here. Ed, you have your thinking face on.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought a lot about Harry Potter in the last, 5 years or however long it's been since it's been obvious that JK is a reprobate. But is that the right word? Might as well be.
I don't care.
Good enough. It's good.
Who cares? I don't give a flying flip. I like you, Sophie, am a recovering Potter addict. I grew up with them as well. I reread them very, very regularly. I've read them each at least, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 times minimum. I've watched all the films.
I used to watch the movies
many
every year
times.
with my mum. Yeah.
I've thought a lot about it. I think I haven't played Hogwarts Legacy, and like I wouldn't play Hogwarts Legacy. I don't think I wouldn't even steal it at this point, just because I think I'd feel weird about it. Like, that's not shade on anyone that has sailed the high seas or found a copy of it in Oxfam or whatever, but I just feel weird about it. But I do think there's a tendency when something that you used to like is now but like bad, and people point out the very many genuine problems with it, like the potentially anti-Semitic goblins, and yes, the thing that you pointed out where all the characters are very they're good because they're good, and they're the ones that are bad because they're bad. I think there is a tendency to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater and pretend that Harry Potter was actually shit the whole time. I don't think Harry Potter was actually shit the whole time. I think Harry Potter was actually pretty good. And like, if it weren't for the fact that JK was awful, Like it would be a good book with some a good series with with problematic elements. I think a lot of the sort of childishy bits that haven't that don't get developed very well or don't really work so well is, I think the problem that happened there for me is that Harry Potter was a very whimsical story to start off with. Like it's not just that it's aimed at children, it's like a well-written book. That's the other part of it that we're missing out here, I think, is that adults liked reading these books to their kids. Like they're good. They're very well written in terms of they pull you in. Like the plot is not necessarily the best, and there are these other elements, but they're so easy to read without being like crap, like without being just like gibberish. And so I think they're very whimsical. I think the problem with things that are overly whimsical comes up if you start to take it too seriously, as if it's like a real world. It doesn't quite work as a real world. It works as a whimsical world. But the original sin, the first culprit of this, is J.K. Rowling herself, who seems to sort of take a sort of Wikipedia style take on her own creation. She seems to lose sight of the fact that it works best when it is not quite something that could really be tangibly real. It's something that it creates an affect in you. It's a vibe. There's a feeling. There's like a nostalgia and a magic and a blah 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 blah. And if you start like over categorizing it and really digging into it, then it doesn't work. But it's not for that. Like it doesn't need to do that. And yet J.K. Rowling's the one that's telling us that we all need to think about it like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's the I think, that's the problem with Harry Potter. And it's the obvious problem. The problem is J.K. Rowling. But,
the problem is J.K. Rowling.
But not for just the reasons that it's obviously J.K. Rowling, but also because I think she's encouraging us to read the books and view the whole franchise in a way which is not a useful or enjoyable way of engaging with the franchise. That's my Harry Potter hot take.
I think absolutely. And I do agree about that. Like, listen, I have some gripes. She does overuse adverbs. That's one of the things about her writing, which is like, you can absolutely criticize that. But like, listen, I used to teach English as an English teacher, as a home language English teacher. And I would recommend Harry Potter to kids because I was like, it scales with you as well. The reading level would scale with you. Like as an educational material, it was pretty much it was invaluable. It was such a good, immersive world that got me into reading and got a lot of other kids into reading. But you're so right that it's J.K. Rowling is the problem. And she expanded on the universe in a way that doesn't suit the world. Where, like, I think even she has accused certain real-life people of being like Death Eaters or like Dumbledore, etc. And I'm like, this is so weird. Like, you can't bring the world of Harry Potter into real life, because that's not what Harry Potter was. And if anything, it could have done with like quite a bit more degrees of separation from the real world that we live in, And it's like, I mean, even the fact that like, I think I haven't seen them, but I believe the Magical Beasts series of movies addresses the fucking World War II. Which is like, don't do that. Nobody wanted that. And that was a series of movies that she was involved in that's based on the release of a bonus textbook that features in the franchise, basically cataloging magical beasts, right? So that she made the plot from scratch for that one. There's no source material really to base those movies on, and she decided to expand on it in the way of how would wizards have responded to the Nazis. And it's like, I don't think you had to do this to yourself and to your franchise, but she has. And you're so right. She's basically unwhimsified it. And it's just so, I was thinking, because like Percy Jackson kind of does, the Percy Jackson books does a similar thing where it's like it ages with the reader and also gets more complex. I've never read them myself, but that's another frequent recommendation for kids that age, is like Percy Jackson. But I don't know how separated from the real world that is. But it's from what I've heard, it seems like a lot more of a healthy separation between, reality and fantasy. And I do think that you're so right. It is just J.K. Rowling that has ruined her own. I don't think anyone would have examined it with this much of a lens if it weren't for the fact that like she as a person has made me examine it.
Yeah.
And be like, in retrospect, a lot of this stuff is kind of weird.
I do think that like basically, when those books were coming out, as I said, I'd never heard of them until the third book, but by the fifth book, everyone had heard of them. They were colossal. And so she was just getting all these plaudits. It's like, man, she's the greatest writer ever. She's basically like the new Tolkien. And I think that shit went to her head and it made her think that, oh, you know what? This like kids story that I've been writing it actually is like the next piece of great literature. So it actually can handle the level of complexity. Yeah, I'm trying to add to it.
Totally agree with this take so far. I mean, Rowling's not exactly written her own Silmarillion, has she? She's just come up with a story on the back of a napkin. You don't get to
believes that like it has the structural integrity to withstand all of this weight, and it just does not.
But I think it's worth pointing out that like currently what she's doing up to these days, apart from her lifelong hate campaign, is she's writing the Cormoran Strike books under that pseudonym. Which are
right?
They're the murder mystery books that are for adults. They're set in the real world. They aren't magical in any way, and they're very clearly adult.
I read one
literature.
of them before all of this. I read one of them. Wasn't good.
Well, I think it's pretty clear. I mean, I've not read any of them. I saw a couple of the earlier adaptations that are on TV, but beyond that, basically she just injects all of her personal bugbears into the books. I think there've been like multiple trans characters who are bad.
I've heard this.
I know that there's a character who is basically Jeremy Corbyn, who's bad because I think people have forgotten now, but she started off her political life being really anti-Scottish independence, and then when that was no longer relevant, she segued immediately into hating Jeremy Corbyn, and then when he lost the election, she just immediately segued into being anti-trans, and there she stayed. But someone on Twitter.
So she's just a grifter.
Yeah,
that's
basically.
What she is. At the end of the day.
I think it's so much grifter. I think she is working through things she.
I think she believes
faithfully
these things.
believes.
I think she believes these things, but I also think that she's absolutely grifting in terms of like political relevance, using politics as a way to stay relevant. Is what I mean when I think she's grifting.
But there's a guy on Twitter whose name I forget his name. He's like a good person on Twitter, and he basically took it upon himself to read the most recent Strike novel that came out recently, and he just kept putting up bits of it on like to show how badly written it is. And one thing that's clear, this one is clearly about like sex workers and porn, and she's adding a bit of a swerve to her turfery. It seems she's very anti-porn. But what's really noticeable about it is that everyone who certainly JK doesn't like, and you, the reader, is not supposed to like, is described as ugly. Every single one. How fat and how ugly and how how
she is extremely fatphobic as well. That is worth saying in the books, as in Harry Potter as well.
That's very true. But just
100% true.
It's a signifier of her roots as a children's children's writer. That just like all the bad people have to also be like ugly physically and stuff.
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs.
And it just
exactly. I think one more thing that I wanted to say is I think, when you said like in defense of Avalanche Studios, and I think that's the saddest thing about all of this is that it is actually a competent game. It is a competent game. It's very attractive. It has side quests and quests that like are mostly pretty, entertaining to do, and there's collectibles and stuff, and the castle's like really beautifully and quite lovingly rendered, which I think every ex and current Harry Potter fan alike is just it's that castle. That castle has like an undeniable special place in a lot of people's hearts, which sucks because whatever. It's again, move on, grow up, right? And I'm on that side. But it is a shame that it's otherwise it's a competent game, but as you say, there's just no saving the world in which it's set. Like of course, this was the direction that the morality would take because J.K. Rowling was involved in the development. And also, this is just the sort of storylines that we're working with. These are the sort of storylines that we have available. Like, one of my major criticisms, if I were to offer helpful criticism about this game, is that the stakes should have been far lower. I talk often and constantly on stream about stakes in media, where I just think that, like, nobody wanted to be, like, doing a massive battle against good versus evil when they wanted to sort of have a fantasy about being at Hogwarts. They just wanted to be a student. So it's like, maybe give us lower stakes, like in the style of Bully, where like the Bully's most successful attribute is that it was actually just kind of about like interpersonal relationships and like quite emotional abuse and emotional manipulation that might like actually relate to kids who have gone through a lot of complex friendships at school. Like, the stakes are really very low. They maybe extend to possibly the town outside in in which the school is set. Like, it extends a little bit to the town at large, but that's it, right? And that's all you needed for this game. And like, it's just so frustrating that it's like, by giving you these massive stakes, which are to the game's detriment. I think that's also the reason that you picked such a poor, like, you know, rampage to set the protagonist on, is just murdering goblins. It's just such a bad vibe, and I just don't really understand how nobody in the process questioned any of that. But again, it's the world. Like, you know, they were kind of assuming a certain level of whimsy that just isn't there anymore, that you can't really interpret Harry Potter with anymore.
But the stakes aren't that high for the actual real plot of most of the Harry Potter books, or at least the first few.
No, they aren't. No.
Like, a lot of them end up that Voldemort's involved or whatever. But early doors, it's someone stolen an important artifact.
Yes.
There are some people who could be getting killed eventually in the school, but currently are getting paralyzed. That's bad, but it's not world-ending bad. There's a criminal on the loose. Like,
yes. Yeah.
You know,
that's
relatively
the thing. More
low-key.
often than not, it was just like the safety of Harry and friends was more often than not the stakes of the Harry Potter plots. And like, it's really only the sort of last couple of books, which like a lot of Harry Potter fans were even quite critical of at the time. I remember reading the 5th book and the 6th book and being like, oh, things have gotten quite serious all of a sudden. You know, things have gotten really quite dire. And like, oh, we're talking about like wizard blood supremacy all of a sudden. I don't know, this feels kind of rogue, but okay.
JK's editor got away from her with those ones.
Yeah. It's the thing, she just keeps letting it get away from him, man. It's like, that's the thing. I think nobody wanted that from the original franchise. Nobody wanted that from this as well, which is such a shame because, like I said, it's a mechanically very capable game. If it is a bit cookie cutter, it's like fun to play up until a point. And like I said, you just can't morally get behind any of the activities of your protagonist, whilst everyone is saying like you're such a good person for doing this. It's impossible to get behind.
It is worth saying that Avalanche, the studio that made this, were working on this game for a very long time. I remember some footage of it got leaked.
Somehow. It's quite polished.
Yeah, but some footage got leaked ages before the game came out. Like, because this was a PlayStation 5 game, and a PlayStation 4 version of it got leaked out. Like, I don't think they even made a version of the PlayStation 4 in the end. So my point is, they've been working on this for a really long time. And well before J.K. Rowling was particularly publicly known as who she is now. So it felt really bad that like they've been working on it so long, and then J.K. just fucked it for them, basically. I mean, it's still it was still the biggest selling game that year. It sold incredibly well. So I guess they did all right there. But I mean, at minimum, they a lot of them must have felt pretty conflicted about doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I don't know how much we have to say about it. To be clear as well, is that like I do agree with you, Ed, where I'm also like I think people shouldn't play it. And obviously I played it because I did want to see what it was like, and I kind of wanted to hate it, to be honest. When I got it, when I sort of downloaded it, I wanted to hate it, and I did. So I got what I wanted there. But I absolutely do think it's weird, and it does feel weird to play it. It does really feel weird, so I really wouldn't encourage anyone to play it. And I also wanted to say to our listeners that I did ask both of you as well about covering this before I did it, because I was like, is it weird to cover it? So I'm aware of some of you listeners think that it's weird that I covered it, and I apologize if you feel that way. Hopefully you feel like my critique is sort of balanced enough that it makes up for it. But again, want to reiterate, don't buy it, don't participate, don't send any money to J.K. Rowling, just don't do it. Don't do it.
Well, I mean, I think it's just to be on that issue. I think it's important that we talk about games that are not just bad games, but like are potentially reprehensible games. It's important that we cover from a political angle what exactly is in this game. I think like in a theoretical circumstance where you played it and it actually, you know what? This game plays fantastic, and the politics in it are actually great. Maybe we wouldn't have talked about it. You know, because like obviously our blanket advice is do not play this game. You should not, or certainly should not buy this game. Should not give any money to it. If we had wide scale good things to say about it, maybe that would be another issue. But since you didn't like it, we as I say, we talked about it before off podcast. We knew you didn't like it, so I think that might be a different issue. It's one thing I think it's important that these things are discussed, and I mean, I think also that we discuss it truthfully. So like we're gonna, if there are, as you said, there are plenty of good elements to this game. We should be honest about that. But if overall your feelings of this was, if it wasn't for the J.K. Rowling being terrible thing, I'd say this was a fantastic game and you should play it. Maybe we wouldn't have covered it. But I think as long as we're very clear, we do not endorse and you shouldn't play this game. And I don't think anything we've said could be taken as an endorsement.
Not ambiguous at all, I don't think.
I think we're okay. And I think it's actually important that these games are covered truthfully and examined, because otherwise, I said this was the biggest selling game that year. And if no one talks about what was actually in it, then no lessons can be learned from that.
Thanks. True.
Okay, well, we're thankfully done with the world of Harry Potter. Maybe forever? Let's hope so.
Let's fucking hope so.
And
Good riddance.
Let's move on to our next game, which is coming from Ed, and is a bit less controversial, but not entirely without controversy.
Yeah, so I've been playing Rockstar's 2018 action-adventure game, Red Dead Redemption 2. I was a bit skeptical that I'd like this game, to be honest. On the one hand, I enjoyed Red Dead Redemption 1 when I played that. I haven't played Red Dead Revolver, but no one really talks about that game, so it's kind of...
That doesn't count.
Huh?
Basically lost media at this point.
What?
Yeah.
Basically, Red Dead Revolver was a game made by a completely different studio that then got bought out by Take-Two and Rockstar. And when Rockstar decided they were going to make a cowboy game, they just gave it a name that made it technically a sequel to this completely unrelated game that is not. I mean, it's a cowboy game, but it's otherwise totally unrelated. It's not even thematically or vibes wise similar.
It's very odd.
The others. Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to hold me back too much, not having played that one. But yeah, I really enjoyed Red Dead Redemption 1, but it's been more than a decade since I played that. And on the other hand, I've tried several GTA playthroughs since Red Dead and bounced off every single one of them. It's just not for me. And Red Dead Redemption 2 is in the same mold, obviously, as GTA in lots of different ways. Like you do a lot of riding about on a large open map on horseback rather than driving around in a car. But, you've got quest givers who appear on your map that you can ride to, or you can use Red Dead 2 as basically a Wild West simulator, whereas GTA is sort of, in both of them, you're sort of having fun with a variety of systems and activities available to you in this sort of big world. So there's a lot of similarities. And given that I did, spoiler alert, very much enjoy Red Dead Redemption 2, part of my questioning when I was thinking about this for the podcast is, why did I enjoy it versus GTA? Like, what's the difference between the two? That maybe bounce off one and play the other very similar game in lots of ways for like 50 plus hours. So yeah, I'll touch on the premise just early doors in case you're not familiar with the game at all. You play as, I guess, a cowboy. Is he technically a cowboy? I don't know. But you play as what we would call a cowboy.
He's not rustling cattle. So
he's not rustling cattle apart from occasionally.
No, but he's hooting and tooting.
He's hooting and tooting.
Tootin' and tootin' and hollering. So maybe
he's in the Woody mold. Let's say that. Who?
What a mold!
His name is Arthur.
Wow.
Yes.
There's a snake in his food.
This is a real hotbed of like people that grew up in the 90s, early noughties nostalgia, isn't it?
Yeah, God.
That's our connection to the cowboy media: Red Dead Redemption, and Toy Story. Also, Back to the Future Part 3. Oh God, that's all of it.
That's too old for me.
Jesus Christ!
You play as a cowboy called Arthur. I mean, I've played it, but it's not part of my childhood. Anyway, you play as a cowboy definitively called Arthur Morgan, who travels with a group of people led by a charismatic leader named Dutch. The game is a prequel to Red Dead Redemption 1, and your group is basically sort of outlawing its way across the West. As the game begins, your group is fleeing some kind of, I want to say, heist that went wrong, some kind of mission that went wrong. But the group views itself as sort of morally maybe a bit better than the average group of outlaws. They have some sort of values about them. It's a little intangible exactly, but they believe in stuff. They're a bit more noble than others, at least from their point of view. They do commit crimes when it suits them, though, but they don't go out of their way to be cruel in the way that some other groups of outlaws seem to. And the game follows the group's misadventures, moving from place to place as a consequence of their actions catch up with them. So, thinking again about why is this game appealing to me, especially when GTA is not, and the first answer that I come to is I found the characters to be very strong.
Yeah.
Arthur himself, at least as I played him, is a criminal, yes, but he's ultimately very soft-hearted. He's a deeply unpretentious man who knows exactly who he is, and he's just a very appealing character to occupy his boots and his stirrups, I guess. There's Dutch, as I mentioned, the charisma and his hat. I'll talk about the hat. There's Dutch, as I say, the charismatic leader who's just recently led the group astray for the first time. He's where the sense of this group is aligned with some kind of greater good comes in. He sort of sets the tone from that point of view. And as the story continues, he behaves increasingly erratically, which slowly builds tension with him and other members of the group. There's John Marston, who is the protagonist of the first game, and his wife Abigail. There's Dutch's second in command, Hosea. There's a man with African American and Native American parents, Charles, a parentage that is made very relevant in the society that the game is set in, slavery having only been abolished 30 years prior, and it's still actively carrying out genocides against Native American peoples. The game explores both of those elements to certain extents, and I'll touch on both of those things later on. And another very distinctive character, there's a character called Micah Bell, who's kind of a wild card, and he gets closer and closer to Dutch as Dutch behaves more erratically.
Damn, Micah.
Yes, I won't go too much into that sort of element of it. Just it's a relatively spoiler-free summary I've got going on here. But he's a bit of a prick.
He's a bastard from the beginning, so
you meet him and he kills a lot of people for seemingly no reason. What a dick.
Yeah.
And we also have as the game opens, we meet a character called Sadie Adler, whose husband has just been murdered by your sort of main rival group of outlaws, the O'Driscolls. And Sadie then joins up with your group and moves from doing the kind of roles expected of a woman by men in this period to becoming a very capable bounty hunter and a loyal friend. And there are so many more characters, but the point for me is just it's a huge strength of the game, how well realized these characters are, how distinctly I can picture what each of them is like, and you just really get to know them by the end of the game. As I say, the game is long. It's about 50 hours is how long it took me, and the story can move quite slowly. The main story is basically just the story of the gang, which obviously makes it a very broad story to tell. Like, it's not like very structured A, B, this, then this, then this, then this. It's more, here are the events that happen to the gang. The downside of this, there are some parts where you feel like you're doing a lot of stuff which maybe isn't all that relevant, and maybe the game could have ultimately benefited from being like 10% shorter. But the upside is the game really does take its time, and you get to know these characters, as I say, and they're rich enough characters to be worth getting to know. Similarly, you get to spend a lot of time riding around the map. There is a fast travel system in the game, but I believe it was added in later. I think that the game was clearly originally designed with the intention of you riding around it and not fast traveling. And again, the map is rich enough that it's worth riding around it, not fast traveling around it. Outside of certain missions where it ends and it says, do you want to fast travel back to camp? And I click yes. I only fast traveled once in the entire game, and that was just to see how it worked. So the map, the characters, they're all very, very strong. And the setting in general, I think, is a key distinction here. Just spending time in the Wild West of Red Dead Redemption 2, I get a bit of that feeling like you get when you play something like Skyrim or maybe Breath of the Wild, or even in real life when you're exploring somewhere beautiful. You get kind of like a wanderlust. The world feels sort of big. It feels old. It feels like there are stories that have begun and ended before you've even got there. And it's just sort of a beautiful setting. On the other hand, for me, GTA, like, you're typically playing in an American city of a kind that you can visit in the real world and possibly have. And while they have their cool moments, it's not an environment that I want to be in. I don't want to inhabit it. It's big concrete buildings. It's traffic. It's just a less pleasant environment to be in. And that's a very obvious difference between the two games. But like, I think it is important for me. Like, I do want to be in that world, explore it and see it. Whereas GTA,
I've always known, Ed, I've always known that you're an outdoorsman. You just have that about you.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I don't really ever go inside. I'm outside right now.
Rugged individualist.
You actually always record this podcast from a cabin in the woods, right?
Yeah. It's really difficult in terms of Wi-Fi, but we make it work.
Yeah.
You're such a
surprisingly good, soundproofing. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. It's just that there's no one around for miles and miles and miles, so it makes it very easy. Yeah. So yeah, GTA is basically simulating an environment that I've also just been to loads. Like I've been to big cityscapes loads of times. Most of the people listening to this podcast will either live in a big city or live very near to a big city. Like the majority of people will. So it's just not that interesting of a place to spend my time. Whereas Red Dead takes me somewhere I've never been and lets me explore it. So I appreciate that. And that's just the space element. There's also the time element. The GTA is always set roughly when the game came out, like give or take. Red Dead Redemption 2 is set at the end of the 19th century. It's set in the same decade as Hogwarts Legacy is set, it turns out. It's set in 1899.
Maybe there'll be a crossover.
Who knew? Probably. So I think both series, GTA and Red Dead, do a good job of capturing a bit of the vibe of the period. GTA feels like a biting satire of sort of the disposability and the sort of subsumed violence of late stage capitalism. It's like a very harsh critique of American like Americana and all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, Red Dead is set in the turbulent period at the end of the Wild West, as the US government consolidates its power across the middle of North America all the way to the West Coast. And the scope for this kind of outlaw life fades away, and that the game really captures that feeling. And again, like I just got to say, I'm just more interested in that second time period. It's a departure from my actual life. Tragically, I actually do live in the late stage capitalist period that GTA is simulating for you. So I don't feel like I really need to simulate that too much.
And in a big concrete city. Well, yeah. I was going to say big concrete city, but you live in a cabin in the woods. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't break the law of the podcast,
Sophie. I also feel like the developers like Red Dead's time period of setting more, which I don't know how you prove that exactly, but what I'll say is GTA is developed by Rockstar North or Rockstar UK, who are a Scottish-based development team who we've discussed before because of their recent potentially union-busting practices. And so there's a certain scathingness to the way they portray American cities, I think. Like there's a slightly outside looking in thing, though there really a lot of people in, I think, the English speaking world outside of America have in their relationship to America, where we're aware of our similarity to American culture, and yet like we sort of despise it to a certain extent. Like there's a weird tension where we're both deeply ingratiated in American culture, but also external to it, which I think the GTA games really show. On the other hand, the developers of Red Dead Redemption 2 are Rockstar San Diego. They're based in the American West. They're sort of telling the story of the history of their own region to some extent. So to me, it wouldn't be a surprise if there's a certain affection for the setting of Red Dead Redemption that there isn't in GTA. There's a slight romanticization of the Wild West, just a slight one, which is kind of entirely absent from GTA, which is more of like a comic caricature of contemporary society. So I think it's not just me that prefers the setting of Red Dead. I think Rockstar, I think the people making these games, the different people making these games, prefer Red Dead to GTA. The last thing I'll say in direct comparison between the two is I think what the game wants me to do feels a bit different. GTA is, they're both kind of sandboxes, but within the GTA sandbox, I feel like it's geared up that what it wants me to do, or at least what I think it wants me to do, is steal a car, then run over some pedestrians with it, and then have a shootout with the police, preferably with a really big gun, like a rocket launcher or something, maybe even try and steal a helicopter, and then I die, and then you'll do that again. And like, I don't mind doing that in a game, but like, I do it a couple of times and I've sort of had my fill, and then I spend the rest of the game feeling like I'm sort of not doing the main thing that the game is designed for me to do.
What game?
In Red Dead 2, yeah, I feel like I'm not playing it properly. In Red Dead 2, like I guess you could do the equivalent of all those things. Like you could steal a horse and run over pedestrians with it and then have a shootout with the police. Like you do that as part of the missions, but it's not something I ever felt the game was telling me that I sort of ought to be doing. I don't think it wanted me to do it. Indeed, there is a loose morality system in the game, and if I did do those things, my version of Arthur would like lose morality points. Like he'd be further away from the good guy that I want him to be. So like there's actively reasons for me not to do it, really. And in place of that kind of gameplay loop, there's the sort of selling point is the huge variety and the huge amount of detail that they've got in Red Dead Redemption 2. You can hunt, you can fish, you can watch movies, there's such a large quantity of things. And to be honest, I didn't do too much of that stuff either. It's not that I really love all that stuff, but it's just there's so much of it and there's so many little bits that it never really felt like I was avoiding doing the main thing. Like, it felt like there wasn't one main thing. There was just a million different things that you could do. So I think that's kind of the separation that I see. GTA, I feel like I'm missing the main thing. Red Dead, I don't think there is a main thing. And also, I don't want to skim over those details too much. On the one hand, before I went into this game, I was worried that the details were basically going to suck. Like they were just going to be there to pad out the stats of the runtime of the game. But that wasn't really my experience. Like, yeah, I didn't spend that much time on the details, but there were some details that really stood out to me as very memorable. Like, there are a lot of little sort of vignettes that you encounter, like little characters that you meet on the side of the street, for example, who are having like a little story moment. And one of those that particularly stood out to me was there was a guy who was standing behind his horse, and I called out to greet him, and he turned around to greet me, and the horse kicked him in the head and instantly killed him. And I sort of had to back away sheepishly. Like, what the hell? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. And it's that sort of moment is like very memorable little detail that you don't like. I assume that moment's planned in some way, but like it felt very real, very organic. I really enjoyed it. So I've sung the game's praises to some extent, and we're going to move on to the politics. But first, I do want to complain a little bit. I like to do a complaining section. You know, when I'm playing the game and thinking about the podcast, I like to make a couple of notes of things that have annoyed me, and I feel like I'd have missed out this important section if I didn't bring them up. So my first complaint is the controls took quite a long time to feel natural for me. The same is true in GTA, and that's because the buttons are often quite context dependent, changing according to what's near you, what activity you're doing. And because they need to be able to accommodate such a wide variety of activities, it takes hours before it felt properly smooth for me. I don't know if there's a thing that you could do that would fix that. I think it's a downside of having the number of buttons that you've got with a game that needs to do this. And to be clear, I played this on the PlayStation, so maybe it'd be better on PC. I don't know. Second, as Sofie mentioned, the hat. I loved my hat, and I hated losing my hat. And I had experiences a number of times where I would log on, and seemingly for no reason, my hat would have disappeared. And that was you lose your hat if you die. But there are times where I feel like I shouldn't have lost my hat, and I didn't have my hat, and it was deeply, deeply upsetting. So that's a major problem with the game. 0 out of 10 would not play. My third and my final little annoyance I'll bring up is the characters love to fucking nag. Jesus. You get this sort of thing in lots of games where the character on screen will tell you what to do. You know, they'll say, hey, over here, or like, come on, open this box, you know, something like that. And then if you don't do that action within a certain period of time, they'll say it again, or a similar word to remind the player what they should be doing. In Red Dead, they are so ready to go with this. They give you an instruction, and within seconds, they'll like nag you for it again. Like, it's like, Arthur, into the next carriage. Like 2 seconds pass. Arthur, come on, we're in the next carriage. Arthur, unlock that door. And then they repeat it like every 5 seconds. It's like, I know.
Come on, Arthur.
Give me a sec. God. By the end, it was honestly a little bit annoying, but by the end, it was just really funny. It was like, all right, chill out. I'll get there in my own. Well, I mean,
it's your fault for not being, you know, on the ball. You know, it's up to you. You got to be opening those doors. You got to be unlocking those doors.
I know. I mean, there was one point right near the end of the game where I had like a firefight, and then you had to run and get on a train, and like you finished the firefight, and the characters got on the train, and like I was at the other end of the place where where the firefight had been happening, and they wanted to be on the train. I'm like sprinting, literally max speed, and between me being able to get there and getting to the train, like while sprinting, they said it like 3 or 4 times. I physically couldn't have got there quicker. Like, give me a break. But anyway,
so funny.
I found that very entertaining. It kind of undermines like the seriousness, like of like Arthur Morgan, like being kind of a cool, like, you know, cowboy-y guy, and he's got some guy going, come on, hurry up, Arthur, hurry up, Arthur. I'm like, Arthur wouldn't stand for that. Anyway, so I'll talk about the politics of the game a little bit. It's hard to even know where to start with it, because the story, it's very self-conscious in its politics, I would say. There are so many different threads that we could try and unpick, and to give a good account of this game's politics, like, you'd probably need to give a good account of the politics of like the American Wild West at the end of the 19th century. Which is certainly not something I could claim to be an expert or hugely knowledgeable on. So what I say will be will inevitably be hugely limited versus what you probably could say. But yeah, playing in the game, you're living just at the edge of the rapidly expanding United States. As I say, the game's set in 1899, and really ever since, in fact, even prior to the United States declaring independence from Britain 123 years earlier, the US has been expanding and expanding and expanding. And there's this idea of manifest destiny used as justification and explanation for this expansion. 1899, in fact, is the year after the Spanish-American War of 1898, which ends with the US getting sovereignty over Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and establishing a protectorate over Cuba. So, like, American expansion is a real process, a real hot button process at this moment in time.
The good news is obviously that's over. It's not happening anymore. 100%. We don't have to worry about that. It's completely dealt with.
Thank God.
They're completely free of any dealings in Latin America.
Exactly. Also, of course, in that period of 1776 to 1898, there's been a massive period of civil war, primarily resulting from the southern states' economic dependence on slavery and reluctance to give up slavery. So, yeah, in this whole period, you're seeing the United States consolidate itself and its control over its territory, and that's the backdrop the game takes place in, and that backdrop creates a lot of tensions that the game portrays, and we get to sort of play them out to varying degrees. Maybe not the most obvious example, but the one that stood out to me the most, that I think the game spends a lot of time with, is the interesting storyline involving the Native American community whose land is being sort of stolen from them by the US Army. You try and help them as best as you can, but even within that, there's a lot to be explored. For example, the leader is a man named Rain Falls. Rain Falls is very resigned, but also arguably has a more realistic appraisal of their capacity to resist American expansionism, while his son, Eagle Flies, is much more idealistic and is justifiably furious at the situation and leads a much more violent military response to the situation, which in turn creates the pretext for increasing violence against the community by the United States. So the game here presents not only the reality of a complicated political situation where the US are clearly the bad guys, stealing land from Native Americans and continuing to do so for centuries, but it also invites you to consider how you would respond. What does resistance look like in a situation where you've all but lost? Both Rain Falls and Eagle Flies have a very understandable and sympathetic perspective that the game explores, and I honestly go back and forth on who I think is closest to being right in the context. I think there's a clear... I think it's a very interesting depiction, and I think it encourages you to engage with it seriously as an event and put yourself in those shoes. And for that, I think it's very effective. We also are seeing... Also, I would want to add that there's an interesting complexity here as well, in that the intervention that your group is making it becomes more and more obvious, not necessarily in the interests of the Native American community you're dealing with, which adds even a further complexity. Even you, who's clearly going into this situation personally, like my Arthur Morgan was anyway, with the best of intentions, even you are making the situation worse because you're sort of ultimately serving interests that you're not even particularly aware of. I won't go into too much detail on that because I think you should play the game for yourself. And this happens quite late on. Another clear tension that you're seeing the fallout of is the American Civil War. You see that in the game, both with the presence of older, injured veterans begging in the streets, but you also see it with former slave plantations and former slaveholding families that are continuing to thrive. Famously, you also see this in the existence of the Ku Klux Klan in the game. The Ku Klux Klan are presented as more or less bumbling idiots. There's a bit like the depiction in Django Unchained, I would say, if you've watched that film.
Oh, yeah.
And they're some of the only people that you can go up to and just straight up murder them, and then you'll get good guy points from that. Most other cold-blooded murder is negative, but correctly, that's not how it works here. In reality, the KKK were quite marginal in this period, I think. By the early 1870s, the Ku Klux Klan had sort of failed to overthrow the post-Civil War era, and they were kind of on a nadir until the Birth of a Nation film came out in 1915, when they surged in numbers again. So I think there's sometimes, maybe this is picky, but sometimes there's a thing that sort of liberal media can do or some media can do where it presents like really sinister and evil and powerful things as like a joke, and they think that's like very effective propaganda against them, or I don't know, they think it's like very useful. And sometimes that can be useful, and sometimes I think it can make you not take seriously a threat that you actually should take seriously. But I don't think that is actually super relevant here because the KKK historically were actually not that strong in this period. So you're actually okay to sort of make fun of them and just shit on them. Like, they're not that much of a threat overall at this exact moment in time. So I don't mind them being portrayed as a bunch of fucking losers because, like, only bumbling twats with, like, the real scariest people might not have even been in at that point. There are a bunch of different groups that were very similar to the Ku Klux Klan that were existing and thriving at that period, but the KKK is included in the game because they're a more recognizable one that we can all know that it's okay for you to, shoot them and have a good time. Do you know what I mean? And there's obviously a certain appeal to venting your frustration by shooting Klansmen in the same way that there is shooting Nazis in every video game ever made, basically. So yes, Red Dead Redemption 2 is also depicting this sort of post-Civil War period through the examples I've just given, and we're seeing racism sort of still existing in the world, being used to justify the extreme exploitation of the American South during slavery, and still being used in the period that the game's set in to maintain white supremacy, and obviously still being used today for the same reasons. Another tension that the game brings up is between what society expects of women, namely to be homemakers of one kind or another, and the reality that women are as capable of men and have as many interests as men and should be able to do whatever they want to do. And that's played out in the character of Sadie Adler, who, as I say, goes from sort of doing those traditionally like woman-coded roles in a male-dominated society to being one of the most effective and likable members of the gang. And I feel like I'm sure I could be easily disproven here. I feel like even the biggest hater of women in video games would struggle a little bit to dislike Sadie.
Like Sadie.
She's just such a well-written character.
She's so
likable. I mean, I haven't gone looking for the content. I'm sure someone's managed to hate Sadie for being a woman, but like, you would struggle. Like, she's really, really well written. She's really good, and she's, I don't know, maybe my favorite character. She's certainly up there.
From what I remember when this game came out, the main kind of weirdo misogynist thing about this game was that in the city that exists in the game, there's a suffragette who is like has a sign up,
I remember that.
and a bunch of people were like murdering her in the street and stuff. I think they did something to like, they made her like invincible or something. I'm not entirely sure what happened with that. But that was the main target from what I remember. I think those idiots largely ignored Sadie, I think.
Yeah, it would be hard to get anything on Sadie. I also think the ideology of Dutch and the group themselves, like, they see themselves as basically good people. They have this idea of themselves as kind of fundamentally free in some way and as self-dependent, even though they spend much of the game stealing stuff from people, making them therefore utterly dependent on people. But whatever, they've got this, cowboys are often taken as the mascot of of the American man, the American dream, rugged individualists, like Alex said earlier, who are basically good people, but are more importantly, hardy, self-reliant types. So, the game is depicting like a very classic sort of ideology that springs from this sort of period. And these rugged frontiersmen, the very conditions for their existence are sort of fading away as depicted by the game, as the frontiers themselves become incorporated into and consolidated within the United States. So there's a lot of like stuff going on politically in this game. I've just scattershot touched on a few points. I'll certainly give the floor to my co-hosts in a second. I'm sure they've got lots more interesting things to say, but I guess I'll just end the politics bit by saying I kind of fundamentally view the series as being about the death of the cowboy, the death of this sort of avatar of a kind of rugged individualism, liberal individualism. This is even more explicit in the first game, which is set even closer to the end of the Wild West era. And what killed the cowboy? Well, both in real life and in the games, it's US expansion and consolidation of its territory. And that's the same thing that led to the genocides of Native Americans, whose closing stages are depicted in this game. It's the same logic that led to the incorporation of slave states into the United States, ultimately leading to the Civil War, with this game being set in its aftermath. We see it reflected in the ideologies that the characters in the game have themselves, from the racism until very recently required to maintain the slave states, and still required in the course of the game to explain the genocides of native peoples, or the belief in that individualistic form of freedom, rugged independence, blah, 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 blah. And all of these kinds of ideologies are the kinds produced by a rapidly expanding colonial society. So a great deal of what the game says politically, for me, comes back to that. It's connected to that colonial and particularly US expansion, the world that the US builds and the worlds that it destroys. And all of these processes, we've already alluded to it, they're still going on to this very day. Colonial powers committing genocide against native peoples, racism being used to justify hyper-exploitation and oppressive social conditions, and of course, poor treatment of women, and of course, as Alex has referenced, United States expansion. It seems to be alive and well today. At different times and places, all of those themes can be more or less explicit. Today in the US, we are clearly entering an era where it's becoming a bit more explicit again. And this game was also set in an era where those themes were very explicit, which makes a game with these themes set in this setting, unfortunately, even more relevant and engaging politically today than it was when it came out. And unfortunately, it feels like it's getting more relevant every day. So if you've got the patience for a 50-hour story, I would highly recommend this game. I liked it way more than I expected. I thought it was going to be detail rather than substance, but actually it was both. That's sort of my takeaway of the game. I think it was very good, as you can tell. And I'd like to invite my co-hosts to contribute anything that they feel I've missed, because there's such a wide array of things to do. There's so much I would have missed. Please, go ahead.
I love Red Dead. I love Red Dead 2. I've never played the original Red Dead Redemption. Obviously, the PC version only became quite recently available, I guess. So I might play it at some point, but I love Red Dead Redemption 2 so much. My TikTok feed is full of very dramatic edits of Arthur. I love Arthur so much. I think he's such a wonderful character. And I think what they did with the politics is really bold, given that I feel like the Western genre, it's very easy to set things in the West and just kind of not address any of this stuff, even though it's such a political time. So it shouldn't be as easy to avoid addressing Native American and slavery issues. But I think the way that they did and very sensitively made it a primary part of the plot, especially with the Native American genocide. I think that, and such wonderful, sympathetic and human characters as well, paid such wonderful attention to it that it's hard to hate it. Even if you are super anti-PC or whatever, it's just such compelling writing, I think, that they really did it justice. And I think that was something I was concerned about when I started playing the game, because as you say, comparisons between GTA and Red Dead are kind of inevitable. And I was like, ooh, GTA always kind of skirts this line of being a little bit edgy, a little bit on the edge of problematic, sometimes openly problematic. And I was worried they would have this sort of same flippant attitude towards a very, very political time in US history. And I was just so blown away by the sensitivity with which they addressed it. And something I also wanted to say, you mentioned the pacing of the game. It could be 10% shorter. I absolutely agree with that. I think, as you say, it's a long story. It takes a long time. But to anyone who would criticize it, you haven't, but to anyone who would criticize it as being too slow, too long, absolutely disagree. I do think that also the time it takes to develop the story and the slow, deliberate nature of all of the scenes and the shots and the story development feels like a love letter in and of itself to the Western genre, because that is what Western films are like. They are slow. They are an extremely slow genre full of very pensive, shots of the horizon with horses running around and cowboys being thoughtful and quiet. Western movies actually, a lot of them, especially the classic Western movies, just don't have a lot of music. They have a lot of very long moments of silence that allow you to sort of sit there and think and take a beat. And I think that was really bold for a video game to do when we are so much more accustomed to, action following action following action. But the game actually makes you sit and look at the scenery and enjoy those moments of silence in a really poignant way that feels very well researched and well attuned to the Western genre. So I have such strong positive feelings for this game.
Okay, I definitely agree with both of those points. I think for me, sometimes when I'm playing a video game, I'm sure like a lot of other people, I've got this big list of video games that I want to play, and sometimes at a certain point in a game, I'm like, well, I kind of want to just tick this one off now. I want this one to be done so I can play the next one.
Yeah.
But I didn't really get that with Red Dead. It takes such a long time, but I basically just didn't ever feel rushed in the game. I always felt like I wanted to be, or not that I didn't feel rushed, but I felt like I didn't need to rush. I felt like I was just enjoying riding the horse through the world. And like I honestly don't get that too often in games, where I was just sort of happy with it being that long. And yeah, I agree. This game really plays it straight, and not in that it's not funny or fun or like it can be silly and goofy. It's got a lot of sort of gags in it, but like it fundamentally plays it really straight in a way that GTA is not played straight. It's never played straight. It's always got a little twinkle in its eye, even when it's playing it at its most straight. Like let's say GTA 4 is played a lot more straight than GTA 5, but even that's like still got a lot of comedy in its very perspective. So
it's so sincere.
I agree. Yeah, it's so sincere, and it's got these like sections where maybe like they just sort of play a whole song, like they play like quite a moving
Beautiful.
Song.
I have one of those really songs just like in my playlist, Unshaken. I think bound.
Yeah, so do I, by
in my. It's such a good song. Yeah,
it's such a good song. Yeah.
And also getting a black artist who did that song, a very sort of also American black tradition in that music as well. Really powerful inclusion too.
Yeah, I really love this game. I would say I played it when it came out, and I have not played it since. I think part of the thing is, I mean, the length discussion. You guys know I enjoy a long game. I have a very high tolerance for long games, but this game is so long that basically means I would like to play it again because I don't really remember that much of the story, to be totally honest. I think as you were talking it, I was like, remember that? Oh, yeah. The whole time. But I feel like I can't justify playing a game of that length that I've already played before when there are other new games I could be playing. But I will say there's also the other issue with the length here is that it is a very long game. And then when you think the game is pretty definitively over, it's actually like 10 hours minimum left to go. And I liked that at the time, but I could see, like, especially if you are a lot less tolerant of it, then that can be a bit of a stretch for you. But no, I think it's a really beautiful game. I think both the Red Dead games, I mean, the first one has a pretty good story. At the time, I thought it was amazing. It was like easily the best story they made, but Red Dead Redemption 2 kind of blows it out of the water in pretty much every regard. But I mean, it's still worth playing Red Dead 1, so I do recommend it just to see what happens with the story, basically, because it's because 2 is the prequel. But yeah, so that means I don't really have that much direct specific to say because it was so long since I played it. But the thing I really loved about it was the camp that you have. So as Ed said, you end up in various places as the story goes on, but you always have this camp where all the members are there and hanging out. And most of what you can do there, most of the time isn't a great deal, but you can have little chats with people, and that's nice. But at various story points, the game basically forces you to go back to the camp, and then it pretty much launches into what is like one of these like immersive theater productions where the entire camp is doing these scenes around you, and like you can involve yourself somewhat in it, but basically every single person is doing something. And there's things going on. I remember there's a bit, I won't spoil exactly what happens, but essentially the gang has what goes through what is superficially a success. They get what they wanted, but it's basically they get it through abject humiliation. And they all go back to the camp and they feel obliged to have a party, basically, to celebrate this success they'd had. But it's a genuinely incredible depiction of like a party that goes sour and everyone gets more and more resentful as the night goes on and they start arguing and stuff. And it feels really bad. And I was just like, this is incredible. This is in a video game. I couldn't believe it. And I mean, that's just a single example of this is one of the most polished games ever made. It's worth saying at the time that there was a bunch of controversy because one of the Hausers, I think Sam Hauser, the 2 Hauser brothers, one of whom has now left and is doing rounds. He turned up on This Morning recently, which is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. One of the co-creators of GTA games on This Morning talk about stuff. But I think it's the other one, the one who's still there. He said in the press, he was boasting about the fact that they have 100-hour weeks to get this game made and stuff. And there was a whole thing where a bunch of people, because they have such grueling work conditions, there's obviously a huge amount of turnover. And anyone who hadn't managed to last to the end of this very long development cycle were cut off the credits, even if they'd been there for years.
Wow.
But I think they put out a bunch of the names on the website afterwards because they got bad press. But anyway, so that is a controversy about it. But I do think, despite all that, it is an incredible piece of art. But my only kind of maybe issue with it artistically, and this isn't really an issue of the game per se, but it's just, as we mentioned before, none of us really know anything about Westerns. I've barely seen any, except things like, Back to the Future 3 and Toy Story, if that counts. My actual exposure to I mean, I like your admission that Back to the Future 3 does count. Yeah, I have very little connection to Westerns as a genre, pretty much outside of the Red Dead Redemption games. So I have a nagging suspicion because I think, wow, this is actually really deep. It's really deep examination of like what the American West meant and how it's ending and how they feel about it and how maybe it was hollow the whole time and things like that. But then I think these themes are probably heavily explored in Western films. And if you are a fan of all those movies and you've seen them all, my suspicion is that Red Dead Redemption says very little that was new. Red Dead Redemption 2, I should say. I suspect that's even more true of Red Dead Redemption 1. I can't really put a finger on what proof I have of that, but it's just the vibe I get that this is probably just like, if you play the GTA games, they routinely like recycle things from movies that came out. Like, I remember GTA 4 basically recreates the whole shootout from the end of Heat, for instance. And my suspicion is just like, if you actually watched those movies, you would just see this as like a checklist of pastiches of, oh, well, this is just like that movie, things like that. So my suspicion is that it's less intelligent than it really is. But I mean, certainly as someone who has not seen these films, it definitely worked on me.
I mean, to be clear, the bit earlier when I was talking about Woody, that was a joke. I have actually seen quite a few Westerns.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like
I also have, actually. I've also seen quite a few Westerns.
I've underestimated my co-host, and I apologize.
That's okay. There's certainly themes that appear in lots of other Westerns, but like, I think it's definitely elevates the material, and what Westerns haven't really been around for quite a lot. There's been decades since the sort of 60s where you're getting like the Clint Eastwood Dollars trilogy and stuff like that. Like, it's been a really long time since Westerns were like a really popping genre. So you are getting stuff, maybe some stuff that's been covered, but as Sofie was sort of alluding to, it's bringing a much more contemporary perspective on the same kinds of stories. So I'm sure that if you're like a real diehard and you're like reading Western books or whatever, if you're like a huge Western fan, maybe. But in terms of like popular mainstream Western media, like Wild West media, it's the best that I've seen. Sofie, not the best. It brings a lot of innovative stuff or has new perspectives on things. Sorry, Sofie.
Sorry, I put my hand up not to interrupt you, just because I was like, I really wanted to add on that. Like, I think just because things have been explored in a different, before, doesn't mean it's not worth exploring again. I actually also think we have to look at the idea of why is this a game? And it is because choice is such an important facet of this story, is that ultimately, we were also talking about stakes earlier, the stakes of this game are extremely low. It is ultimately about a man and his relationship with himself and how the relationships around him and to the environment that he's in affects that relationship with himself. It really is sort of ultimately the story of Red Dead 2, I would argue. And
his limitations. Like,
and his limitations.
There's a great deal of the most important things that happen in the game are completely outside of his control. And I think that's sort of sending up to some extent the really hardcore individualism that the Wild West genre often does. Like,
absolutely.
Sorry, Sofie.
Yeah,
continue.
And I think like a lot of that's also like quite a typical theme explored in Westerns, is like, can you really be like a cowboy and also a good man, kind of thing. But like, I do think that the element of choice here makes it a really innovative way to play that story, because you can choose to be shitty Arthur. I think you're bad for doing that, because I don't think that's the canon story, but that is a way that you can play that game, that you can play it like this typical, bloodthirsty bullseye cowboy. But the fact that you could choose not to, yeehaw, and I think most people probably choose not to. Most people, that's probably not their canon Arthur, because the game does not necessarily make you feel bad, but it's like, did you really need to do that? Did you need to kill that person? Did you need to steal that horse? Did you need to rob that bank or whatever? I think it's a really valuable way of telling that story. I think my favorite Western is There Will Be Blood, which I don't know if I guess I don't know if it counts as a Western, but I love that movie. It is set, I think, in the sort of burgeoning oil industry days.
Sure.
But yeah, that was just an aside. But yeah, I just think that, on the topic of stakes, it's such low stakes, and that's what I love so much about this game, is that there's very few characters in the world of Red Dead who will, except for the characters that have been directly affected by Arthur, who will ever even notice that he was there. And I love that. I think that's so powerful that it's just this one individual man's story and his relationship with the people around him.
I mean, yeah, the individual characters, as Ed said, are amazing. Some of the best written in video games.
Yeah.
Undeniably. All right. Okay, well, we're done with cowboys. It's over. Now we just much like the conflict in questionable Western movie Toy Story. We are the Western is now being superseded by the science fiction space person. Because we're talking about Metroid Prime 4: Beyond, the much delayed and belated return for Metroid Prime. It recently came out just before Christmas on the Nintendo Switch 2, although you can get a version on the Switch, which is apparently not too bad.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So, maybe I'll pick it up.
Maybe. It's like apparently...
Depending on how good this review is.
Well, long story short, I would not recommend it. It's not very good.
Uh-oh. Well...
maybe I won't.
But I mean, it runs well on the Switch too, and all reports are it runs well on the Switch One as well. So if all you care about is your frame rate, it's great.
That's all I ever care about.
Yeah, so Metroid Prime 4 is the sequel to Metroid Prime 3, which was a game that came out on the Wii. So there has been well over a decade between 3 and 4. These were much loved. Metroid Prime 1 is genuinely a phenomenal game. I would recommend to everyone that they pick up if they have not and play. If they have not before, Metroid Prime Remastered, I think it's called, which is on the Switch 1. That is a fantastic version of that game, and it is a much better game than Metroid Prime 4. So there was a huge gap. There was kind of a weird thing that happened when they were developing it. Like almost immediately after the Switch came out, which was in 2017, I believe, they announced that they were making Metroid Prime 4. And this was literally announced with a logo and nothing else. And they said it was being made by Bandai Namco in Japan, which was a bit weird because the original 3 games were made by Retro Studios, an American developer who Nintendo own, and they made the Donkey Kong Country Returns games afterwards. And then I think about 1 year after that, they announced that actually it seems that Bandai Namco had fucked it and they were completely restarting development and handing it back over to Retro, the original makers of the game. So that meant that we had to wait a very long time for this because they were literally starting from scratch. Usually when games are announced, the game has been in production for a while, but now we had to deal with it being started from scratch. And so it finally came out. This was always meant to be a Switch 1 game. Clearly, they kind of added a bunch of stuff to it to make it look nice on Switch 2 because that console had actually come out by the time the game was done. So this has been heavily awaited, and basically the game is pretty much a disappointment. It's not an awful game. It plays fine. As I said, it runs well. The actual moment-to-moment gameplay is decent. The combat is good even and pretty enjoyable. But the real problem is that there is just a complete lack of the kind of vibes and juice that the original Metroid Prime had. Metroid Prime, all the Metroid games, in fact, are fundamentally about exploring an environment, a hostile environment, and a sense of isolation. And there are 2 aspects of that in which Metroid Prime 4 kind of fumbles these. Now, the first is the big issue that a lot of people had going into the game, which is the sense of isolation. So in this game, as was revealed in some trailers beforehand, there are actually now companions along with you in the game. There are basically the plot of the game is you're Samus, the bounty hunter, who does not speak through the entire game. She is called upon to some planet to fight the space pirates, who are traditional enemies in the Metroid games. And on the planet, what's called the Federation. This isn't like Star Trek, but they are, I guess, something at least structurally similar to the Federation in Star Trek. There's some sort of intergalactic organization that are humans that do something. It's never really clear, but they have like troops. They have a military, and they sometimes turn up in these games. And they're here, they're fighting, and it's basically just like kind of a bombastic opening, which is fine for being the opening of the game. And you fight your way through these enemies to get to the end where there's a boss, and then you beat the boss, and then you discover that there was some sort of artifact on the planet that was being seized by these bad guys, and then something that causes the artifact falls off of something, and that causes it to glow with mysterious energy, and then everything goes white, and Samus, and it turns out a bunch of people were teleported to a mysterious planet called Vuros. And that's where you have to explore, and your ultimate goal is to activate a teleporter that will just take you home. That's basically it. And it also teleported a bunch of these soldiers, and you quite early on encounter one called Miles Mackenzie, who became a real figure of hate because he's very kind of Marvel dialogue-esque, or MCU dialogue-esque, or kind of
Gross.
Joss Whedon-esque.
That's my least favorite
He's
thing.
kind of like wisecracking.
That's my second least favorite thing.
Yeah, he's kind of wisecracky and this, and he's like a nerd. Like at one point, he's like a technician, and he has to look at some technical thing, and he says, "Oh, it's gonna get nerdy in here," and that's like a particularly quite cringy line. And the internet. Basically, this guy turns out is like, he's there early on. He's in the first main area of the game, and he featured quite heavily in the previews they showed as a result. And the internet immediately turned on this guy, and they hated him, and they were sure he was going to be with you the whole game, and that was going to completely destroy the sense of isolation that you get. It's a disaster. In reality, he's basically fine. He only pals around with you properly for like that one bit of the game that was in that preview, and there was a lot of complaints that he was like spoiling things for you. He's like telling you to go save your game and things, and it's like, yeah, because it's the tutorial. It's literally the beginning of the game, and that basically ends when you take him to this spot, and then he doesn't really bother you again, except something else I'll talk about in a minute, actually. But there are also a bunch of these other Federation crew members who you meet across the game, and you end up kind of collecting together, and then you fight the final boss together. That's basically what happens. This is quite a violation of the sense of isolation that these games foster, but I will say I think the internet very much overreacted. You play like 90 to 95% of the game alone, and while that one guy, Miles Mackenzie, isn't great, the rest of them are fine, and overall I would say the writing it's non-offensive. It's not very good, but it's okay. But it is also
Can I also add, it's possible to make too much of the Metroids being games where you're isolated thing, given that at least 2 of the previous games have also had you talk to people for quite a lot of the game. Yeah. I mean, especially Metroid Other M, which is the previous mainline.
Well, that's the one that everyone hates. Dread, that is famously terrible. And that's kind of why people were worried about it, because they thought it might be Metroid Other M again. But you're right, Metroid Dread.
But it's not like it's breaking a perfectly like a pristine game that's never tried this sort of thing before. It should have possibly learned its lesson. There's also Metroid Fusion, which is less objectionable because it's 2D and doesn't have voice acting, but it does actually have a companion computer speak to you like for all of like a lot of the game, and that's a great game. Would highly recommend that one. Yeah. So
that's true. There has always, I mean, not always. The earliest games didn't have anything. But for quite a long time, there has been people to talk to in these games. They haven't been completely isolating. However, I do think there is like a certain Rubicon passed of now there are characters hanging out, and like eventually you set up a little base, and you frequently have to go back to that base and go talk to all of them there. It does. One of the things about this game, which I'll get onto in a sec, is that it feels more like it's moving towards being like a bit like Zelda. It's more like an RPG. You go on little quests, you come back, you almost have side quests that you do for people. I mean, I don't think you quite do that, but it's kind of on the verge of doing that. So there is a sense of isolation that is lost, although I do think it was an overreaction by the internet. I mean, as I say, even Metroid Prime 3, which I never played, but my understanding is there's there are soldiers and stuff in that as well, though not to this extent, but there is some of it. So I do think there is a point, but I think it's far less of an issue than what the internet made it out to be. And overall, they're fine. I think if they were actually well-written characters that I genuinely liked, as opposed to kind of just tolerated by the end of the game, it would have been significantly better. But they aren't. They're just kind of like, they're very cookie cutter. There's the nerdy guy. There's the taciturn guy. There's the guy who's the leader and has to be, be strong for them. There's like one who's a bit more charming. She's like a fangirl for Samus. She's like, oh wow, you're amazing, Samus. Can you get in your morph ball? That's great. I know that's slightly more charming, but that's pretty much it. They don't do anything of any interest with those characters. I'll say that. At best, you tolerate them. The other big problem is the kind of structure. So in this game, like traditionally, so we talked about Silksong, for instance. That is what's called a Metroidvania, which is a name that's a portmanteau of Metroid and Castlevania games. And they have similar structures, which were basically entirely set up by Metroid. Really, you should just call them Metroid games. It feels weird that you've just decided to, and also Castlevania, even though that all came later. But
yeah, also just the early Castlevania games are definitely not Metroidvania games. I'll say that as well.
The first
it's very strange
games,
that Vania's been added.
Well, it's because of Symphony of the Night, and that kind of took over a bunch of GBA games. But anyway, as we talked about in Silksong, it's like this vast interconnected world. Everything kind of links into each other. And so it feels like, while it is guided in many ways, it feels very open. It feels like you've got a huge amount to explore. In this game, basically, you have 5 main areas, something like 5, I think, yeah. And they all connect into a central hub area, which is a big desert. And that desert is almost entirely empty. You get given a motorbike and you can drive across it. And there is not much to do there at all. There are these green crystals that by the end of the game, you have to have collected almost all of them. And they're strewn across the entire desert. This is not particularly fun. But if you just collect all the ones you see as you go along the game, at the end of the game, I don't know, pop on a podcast, do it for about 20 minutes, you'll probably get the last one. So it's not incredibly onerous, but it's not interesting in any real way. There are some kind of things somewhat analogous to shrines in Zelda Breath of the Wild, in that you go to a little place, you go on a lift underground and you solve some puzzles down there and you get something. But there's like maybe 10 of those, and that's it, over the entire giant desert. And so it's not a place you enjoy going. But worst of all, it means that all these, because it's a large desert, it means that all of these other areas are not connected to the different areas at all. They're only connected to the desert. And so there's no feeling that like you might, you break through one area and you found yourself in this other area. You didn't realize it was connected. There's none of that. And even those areas feel very linear. They don't, pretty much there is a straight line through them, and occasionally there's a side room that might have a pickup in it. And like maybe there's like a puzzle in that room or something to get that pickup, but there's no sense of proper exploration. The areas themselves, they do some interesting things. Pretty much all of them have a thing where you go through it to basically the end of it, and then you have to work your way back out or do some stuff with it, and it's in some sort of changed state. So probably the best one is this science lab that you go to that's completely frozen because it's in the ice area, and you work your way through it, you go down to the bottom, you find a generator, you turn the generator on, and then the entire place comes alive as it gets started to heat up, and all the ice is melting, and that's kind of an interesting change to it. But that's pretty much the most this game does. I think that the areas are quite boring. There's pretty much a lava area, an ice area, there's a cave, there's a mine, there's a factory. That one's quite kind of interesting because it's literally building the motorbike you have. So each room is like some facet of the motorbike being constructed or put together or something, which is sort of interesting. But even then, it's still fairly linear. Yeah, it's a game that just has no real zing to it. Every element of it is kind of boring. And this kind of gets to my main issue with this game, which is, so before we move on, I am going to post a link into our Discord to a Kotaku article. And this Kotaku article is called Metroid Prime 4 players are discovering the game is filled with vagina doors. And this article is all about
Don't make us bring
all
this
these
back
people
up, man.
who have noticed the vaginal imagery in this game. Huge numbers of people. It was a big talking point on the internet. So I would like to receive my apologies from you both now.
I'm not apologizing. Every single person I spoke to about this, I showed them pictures of the door, and I was like, what do you see? Do you see anything? Is there any particulars? There's not a single person. Literally, I have so many friends who contacted me after that episode who were like, yeah, I looked up the doors. I have no idea what Alex is talking about.
Look at this. Did you follow that link?
Yeah.
I followed the link.
Look,
scroll down to the first post
and I said this on the
posted
episode. I see your point after you pointed out, but I absolutely would not have identified that myself, and I don't know a single other person who has.
Well, here's a big list of other switched on people
I don't know them.
who are alive to the
Listen, Alex, if you're identifying with other gamers, I think you're the one who's got a problem here.
No.
Those are capital G gamers.
I'm basking in my vindication, and I don't care what you two say about it. To be serious, I think this is very clearly a theme they have put into the architecture of this game. My issue, the reason why I brought this up back in whatever episode it was, maybe Ed can tell us what episode that was when we talked about it.
Probably not.
I think he's purged it from his memory. The reason I was interested, I was kind of excited about this because I thought this shows they're doing something. They're doing some interesting thematic work with this game. They're getting into some sort of ideas.
I think it's probably entirely accidental.
It plainly isn't accidental. Look at it. But basically, it doesn't do anything with this, and it doesn't do anything of any interest. My kind of hope back when they announced this game. I'm vindicated, Sophie. I'm not. You can't take this away from me.
Welcome back. I've clicked on some of the links of the people included in that article, Alex. I don't think you wish to be associated with them.
That's what I'm saying. I think
DHS is trying to find property in my small town to barrack illegals. They get $5,000 debit cards and move them into subsidized apartments next to our Walmart. My entire city council's been taken over by people connected to the local commie college. Time to move. That's the most recent post from your best friend in the whole world, Alex.
This is unbelievable. There are some people I know I've seen off of social media who are decent, and I would say this guy Zach Weiss, and he's worked for Kotaku for ages, and I am aware he's a decent person of at least vaguely okay politics. So this is smearing that's going on here by association. I don't approve of it. But my whole point is that back when they announced Metroid Prime 4, my hope was that they were going to kind of learn from the decade plus of video games and do something with some real depth to it, basically. The original Metroid Prime 4 is in many ways kind of a prototype Dark Souls game. It was, certainly at the time, it was very difficult. I think it's a bit easier after having played 3D games for decades and with a better control style that the remastered version has. But back at the time, it was very difficult. And also, the big kind of interesting thing about it is that it had the scan visor. You had various different visors you could get in the game to show you more about the world, and one of them was just the scan, and this would allow you to, it would highlight various things of interest like enemies or just items or little doohickeys in the world, and you could scan them and it would show you some text. So for the enemies, it would tell you about the supposed evolutionary history of the alien enemy and stuff, or the creature and so on, and it's like as if it was a little nature documentary about it. But it would also tell you about the ancient civilization that was going on, and there was a lot to read in it. You would encounter the space pirates, and you could read their databases, and you could find out where they were talking about Samus herself and how terrified they were of her, and how they couldn't work out how she could possibly roll into a little ball like that. It was just kind of funny little joke in it, and just this stuff was kind of fine and good in the original game. But I was there's so much opportunity for depth now that we have games like Dark Souls, games like that have lots of they fold in all this thematic imagery into the item descriptions and so on. And it seemed obvious to me that the scan visor would just be the perfect vehicle for just delivering some real interesting kind of deep storytelling and depth and interesting themes and stuff. So when I saw these vagina doors, which are, I think unambiguously proven to be vagina doors, I thought, man, they're doing something. I do
want to point out that the highest number of likes that any of these Twitter posts has is 752.
That's
the lowest is 3.
That's quite a lot. Well, I don't know.
That's
Look,
really
I'm vindicated. You can't take this away from me.
Not.
You can't take this away from me. Look, literally, if you go on Google and search Metroid vagina doors, you will get a lot of results.
Yeah, because this article exists now. Also, I'm not going to search that.
Other articles. It's not just me. Fucking Reddit threads, lots.
Listen, I'll leave it.
You can't. You're both prudes and unsophisticated. I think that's been well established now. But anyway, my point. I
wouldn't necessarily call the people identifying the vagina doors as being sophisticated.
Look, I say you don't understand the potential depth of thematic.
You can't say this to me, Alex. I'm a woman.
That has no bearing on your ability to appreciate art.
You can't say
Sofie.
it to me.
Anyway, look, whatever. Even if we ludicrously don't consider these obviously vaginal doors to be purposeful, my hope would be that they would explore some sort of thematic depth in this, and they just haven't. The story does almost nothing. I'll spoil it here because you're not missing anything. Basically, you land on the planet, and it turns out there were aliens living there in the past who had a society that was originally technological and then got into psychic abilities, and they discovered a thing called green energy in a volcano, and for some reason they thought if they used the green energy, spit the green energy into the atmosphere, that would reseed the desert into like greenery. But actually, it turned all the aliens into monsters who've been fighting through the game, and they're basically all dead. And there is a sense of sadness about it because you can't bring them back or anything. Your only objective beyond getting home is to take the history of these people and take it to the outside world so that they can exist in some slight way in the future. And that is the closest thing to thematic depth this game has. And it's not very much. The story is just fundamentally not interesting. They don't really do anything with it. Like, there's a villain who's called Silux, and he turns up at the beginning of the game with those space pirate attack I mentioned. Not only are there no space pirates in the rest of the game, but although he appears a couple of times to fight you, he was actually a robot the whole time in those. And instead, he's just in a healing pod by where the final boss turn is at the end of the game. And there is the absolute thinnest of justifications of why he even dislikes Samus. He's just like, they very briefly show some very short cutscene that's like, they have some history and she like left him for dead or something, the end. And that's it. Literally what I've just said is there is no further information than that. And that's like the villain, the antagonist of the game, the final boss you fight. There is so little to this. Metroid Prime 1 is a far more interesting and deep game, and it's not even. And when I was playing that, I was hoping, I hope they can really build on this, because since then things have got a lot more sophisticated, and they didn't even manage that. So yeah, just pretty disappointing, to be honest. I don't really recommend it. Its nuts and bolts are fine. Maybe if you've never played a Metroid Prime game, you'll probably find it decent enough little adventure, but hopes were pretty high for this and really has not lived up to it. So yeah, disappointing. That's pretty much all I have to say for it, except to maintain that I've been vindicated.
I'm going to say one last thing.
All right.
Which is that there is a joke in here somewhere about how the designers of this game, the most alien and unfamiliar design that they could think of was of a vagina.
Well, I will say.
That's all I'm saying.
If you read this article,
I'm saying.
I posted, they do. I guess the closest thing to a justification, like they were able to think of, because I didn't think of this, for a justification for why this very clear thematic imagery is in the game, is just that, Metroid has always been somewhat inspired by the Alien movies. Like there's an enemy called Ridley in the other. It's not in this one, but in the other Metroid games, it is obviously a play on Ridley Scott, the director of Alien. And Alien is full of penile imagery in them.
Mm-hmm. Because Alien is horror for boys.
Yeah, and this is doing this would seem like that's why, that film, they're doing something with the penile imagery. They are like evoking things with that. It's not just an aesthetic choice. They are making a point with it, right? I was hoping they were going to do something with this. And the closest thing is like, oh, well, because Alien did penile imagery, they're doing vaginal imagery. And and genuinely, I think that might be the best justification for it, there, because there isn't anything else like that in the game, which is disappointing.
If for some reason we're doing this conversation seriously, my objection isn't even necessary. I'm not even ruling out the idea that they maybe intentionally did vaginal doors. What I thought was funny was your takeaway from the Metroid Prime 4 trailer.
Yeah, exactly.
Was like, those doors look like vaginas. Like, yeah, maybe. But it'd be like if I showed you an Alien trailer and you were like, those look an awful lot like dicks. Like, it's just a weird, it was just a very funny, out of left field takeaway.
I'm sorry if you looked at the fucking Xenomorph and you
didn't,
at no point it occurred to you that kind of looks like a big penis. I'm sorry if, I mean, I feel like that's your failing and not mine. I don't know what to say.
That certainly wasn't my first thought when I saw the Xenomorph in the trailer.
Well, it wasn't my first thought. It was like at least fifth. Anyway, look,
it's a shame that we weren't doing a movies podcast back in the 80s so we can see how he would have responded.
Yeah, and just think how retroactively humiliated you would be by how wrong you would have been about that.
No, that's my point. It would have still been very funny if that had been your first reaction.
It would have been funny, exactly. Neither of us were wrong. Like I see I see what you saw. I never said you were wrong. I just said it was baffling. And I think that was our main takeaway. I think you're imagining a slight that didn't happen, Alex. It's okay that you saw vagina. It's fine. It's okay that you saw vagina doors.
As I'm sure every single one of our listeners will agree,
it's not just a pipe.
100% vindicated. And maybe we should move.
And
maybe we should move on to the news. Shall we move on, everyone? Is everyone done? Everyone done being wrong and the opposite of vindicated, except me, who is vindicated about this issue? Right. Okay. I think we're done.
All right, Gramps.
All right, Grandpa.
Okay. So, my undisputable vindication over. We're now moving on to the news. And unfortunately, I've got to do quite a segue because it's some quite sad news. Something that's just happened a lot this year is that people have been dying. I was a little surprised that the Game Awards didn't have an in memoriam section, so they could be like a real award show, but they didn't. And this is partly because this death happened just after the Game Awards. But Vince Zampella has very sadly died. He unfortunately was in a car crash after driving a 2026 Ferrari 296 GTS, and he crashed very sadly in a tunnel, I believe, in the Los Angeles San Gabriel Mountains, and very sadly died. He was 55 years old, which is obviously far too young. Vince Zampella is most famous as one of the creators, essentially the creative lead on Call of Duty. He kind of, in many ways, created the video game world we live in, for good or ill, I suppose. And he originally, the kind of story of how Call of Duty got made is sort of interesting. He was a member of a different company, which was weirdly called, I think, 2015 Games. It was a weird name for a company because this all happened well before 2015. But
2015 Inc., I believe.
Pardon?
2015 Inc., I believe.
Yes. And they made a game called a new game in the Medal of Honor franchise, which already existed. It was originally a PlayStation game. And this was called Medal of Honor Allied Assault. And this was extremely popular, and it was pretty much Saving Private Ryan, the game. It came out not very long after that, and it very clearly riffed on it. It had the whole Omaha Beach landing section, and it kind of spawned a whole bunch of games that had Omaha Beach landings at the time. And then EA kind of fucked it.
Spielberg was actually involved in the development of that game.
Well, he was involved
in his idea to make that game.
He was involved
in the game.
In the original Medal of Honor for the PlayStation. I don't know how much he was involved in Allied Assault.
No,
he might have been
Allied Assault. Yeah, I believe so. Feel free to fact check me, but I believe that is true. Spielberg's boys, at least, maybe not him personally, was involved in Allied Assault. Sorry, this isn't important anyway. Keep going.
Yeah. But anyway, then they got kind of fucked over by EA. They gave Medal of Honor to some other company. So they all left en masse to start Infinity Ward, which then made Call of Duty, which was basically Medal of Honor with the serial numbers filed off. And then Call of Duty became the biggest game in the universe, which EA totally could have had if they just kept on to them. And they were saying the politics of Medal of Honor, these Call of Duty games aren't great, and I don't really want to badmouth a guy who just died, but maybe one day we'll probably properly get into an in-depth look at the Call of Duty games, although they are, of course, owned by Microsoft now, which is under BDS. But though, much like the Hogwarts game, we may talk about them without endorsing them in any way. But so maybe it'd be worth looking at the politics of them. But it's worth saying that the very first Call of Duty game, the big kind of thing that was new to the then quite already saturated World War II shooter genre, was that they included the Soviet campaign, that they had a whole extensive section where you played as a Soviet soldier in Stalingrad, in what I thought was incredible and unique at the time, but then turned out to be almost entirely lifted from the movie Enemy of the Gates, the section where they go into Stalingrad. But it was still great and, very unique and, like, frankly, kind of disgracefully novel in showcasing the country that did the most to defeat the Nazis in that war. And, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, the game that really kind of kicked off modern shooters, that really, I mean, the politics of it, maybe not, but it was itself like a really exceptional game, incredibly well paced and just a phenomenal put together game. Then eventually they also got fucked over by Activision, and Zampella and a number of others left to form Respawn, which weirdly was taken over by EA. So they just went back to EA in the end, where it seems that he had a better relationship, was largely able to make what they wanted, I guess, although they never did get to make Titanfall. He never did get to make Titanfall 3, which is very sad. And he most recently was one of the leads on Battlefield 6, which I'm not sure if it did end up outselling Call of Duty, but it certainly won over the hearts and minds a lot better than Call of Duty this year, which is, I guess, maybe a nice kind of end cap to what it turns out will be the end of his career. Very sad that he died, and it's just, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting facet of the games industry that this year we just had all these quite prominent deaths. There have been deaths in the past, but there's just been a glut of them. In fact, I haven't really mentioned it, but apparently the original head of Sega just died, though he died at the age of 91. So I didn't consider it to be that noteworthy a death, and
long and well lived life.
Yeah,
sure.
And I mean, Sega for a very long time were also they just made like cigarette machines and stuff like that back in and jukeboxes back in like the 60s. They have quite a long career, Sega, but that was quite sad as well. But just it's interesting that we've suddenly reached a point in video games where it's matured to the point where it looks like genuinely having an in memoriam section in award shows might actually be necessary, which is not something that's really happened before. So that is interesting in itself. But that's kind of it for the news in a way. It's Christmas, baby. It was Christmas. Not much happened. That's the inevitable reality of Christmas. But something I thought it would be interesting to do is we have a bit of a group discussion about what I think is kind of the biggest news overall of the year entirely. And that is the fall of Xbox. Basically, I think that is by far the biggest thing that's happened. Going into the beginning of 2025, I think most people thought Xbox aren't doing well. They're definitely losing against the PlayStation. It's not been great for them. But by the end of 2025, I think the general consensus has been Xbox is dead or almost dead. It's certainly dead in any recognizable form that it's been until now. There is a slight news story to go along with this, which is just that Eurogamer has reported that Xbox has suffered the worst year on record for console sales in the UK. And that's like ever. Wow. The original Xbox, the Xbox 360, even the Xbox One have not done as badly as the Xbox has done this year, which is kind of momentous. I mean, it's hard to imagine that happening. Even like, I don't know, I'm fairly sure the final year of the Dreamcast probably sold better than like the Master System did in any particular year. So to have your worst year ever this year after, being around for basically 20 years at this point, well, over 20 years, is kind of bonkers. Yeah, so what do people think about it? It's worth saying, like, up front, again, we mentioned it a little while ago, Xbox is under BDS. If you want to hear about that, we have a whole interview with Sarah from No Games for Genocide about it. Suffice to say, that was the last episode, in fact, but suffice to say, you should not buy Xbox games. We do not endorse buying Xbox games. And I suppose to that degree, we are glad they're not doing well. But I do think that the failure of Xbox is, not entirely something to be celebrated. It's kind of maybe indicative of other things going on in the industry. And just a sign of I think, massive corporate, borderline malfeasance, certainly incompetence. Yeah, I don't know. What do you two think about it? I certainly have my own thoughts, but I'd be interested to hear from you two.
My opinion is, on the one hand, 2025 is the year in which Xbox died. And on the other hand, Xbox died on May the 21st, 2013, when they announced the Xbox One. For our younger listeners, the announcement to the follow-up for their smash hit Xbox 360 focused very little on games, and instead they talked a lot about sort of other random stuff that you could do with the console. They talked about how we learned that you couldn't buy used games anymore. You had to buy a Kinect, or they came bundled with the console. The console had to always be connected to the internet. And basically, in the announcement for the Xbox One, completely massacred any hype that anyone might have had for that console. And for the rest of that console generation, Xbox, from having effectively won the previous generation, they were on the back foot from the get-go for that entire generation. And in hindsight, we can see that unfortunately, that console generation was pivotal. And the reason why it's pivotal, I didn't think of this myself. I've seen other people saying this online, so I don't want to claim credit for this observation. But the reason why it was pivotal is the rise of digital gaming. In 2013, digital downloads accounted for between 5 and 10% of sales on consoles, although it's way higher if you do overall video games, because the PC market was already hugely digital at that point. But by the end of that generation, digital downloads were more like 50%. And at the end of that generation coincided with the start of COVID, which has seen digital downloads skyrocket significantly higher than that. So that means for that whole middle generation there is when people started to really build up like a big digitally owned library. And a digitally owned library really ties you into the ecosystem in a more direct way, because you expect to be able to play those games on the next console in a way that you don't always expect to be able to do over the long term with physical media. So what that basically meant was, I had a PlayStation 4 in this console generation with the Xbox One. The PlayStation 5 is announced, and then the next generation comes out. I already have a massive backlog of games that I can immediately play if I buy the PlayStation 5. And even though I had a 360, if I buy the new Xbox at that stage, there's nothing I've got. I lose my entire library of PlayStation games. So they've lost the crucial generation where everyone built up these massive libraries of games that lock them into a specific ecosystem. And from there, they're basically in trouble. They need to do something brilliant to pull the rabbit out of the hat. And they have been, frankly, the exact opposite of brilliant. I mean, just to give one example, their naming convention has completely baffled me ever since they started it. I mean, especially the one that really gets me, because this is the one where they completely lost me and I get confused, and I'm a gamer, I should know this shit, is the Xbox One SX, like S series or X series. Yeah. Well, there we go. Even just then, I just called them the S series or the X series, and that's to contrast with their current generation of consoles, which is the Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X. That's not the same as Xbox One S or Xbox One X. Those are different consoles, and that is insane to me. Absolutely,
it's absolutely bonkers. Yeah,
that is so like Kingdom Hearts level naming conventions right there.
Yeah, I mean, people said that the Wii U name killed that, but I mean, Xbox One S/then Series S, like, come on.
Worse, I think. Yeah.
So, the seeds of the destruction that we've seen in 2025 may have flourished in 2025, but I don't think they've ever really come back from the 2013 fiasco. Sofie, have you got If you got to take?
I guess I don't have much insightful as much as I would. I guess the only reason I would sort of celebrate this at all would be to say, if I believed that the boycott had a massive part to do with it, I think it absolutely did play a part. But I think your analysis is correct that this has been happening for a while. Like, people have been pretty discontented with Xbox for a while. I myself have never even vaguely associated with an Xbox console. I think I've never touched one in my life. I've never been into contact with one in my life. Wow. When I was a kid and had a console, it was always a PlayStation. So that was kind of a done deal for me. And then when the whole PlayStation Xbox drama happened, it was like, well, all the more reason for me to not be the least bit interested in this console. So like, Xbox has kind of always been off the map for me, and kind of only really came onto my map because of the boycott, to be entirely honest. Obviously, being tangentially, obviously into games, I was always aware of Xbox, but I never really gave a shit about anything that happened in the world of Xbox until it became BDS, and I was like, yeah, sure, no skin off my back, because I've never participated in Xbox or any Xbox product. So if I had, it was by accident, where it was, yeah, I think, like I said, I would love to believe that this is in a bigger part due to the boycott, and I like to believe that it has definitely played a role in the sort of like, record lows. I think it can't be well, but I mean, obviously the drastic increase of the Xbox subscription service that we talked about in a couple podcasts ago, like what was it, like an increase of like 20-40%? I don't remember.
It was 50. I think it was 50%.
It was like 50%. Yeah, and that to me just read as death throes. Like, I'm absolutely not surprised. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts, basically. Yeah. I'm just not really surprised.
I do think that the BDS thing has had some amount of impact, but this has been going on for many years.
Yes.
And I think my kind of story...
Final nail in the coffin,
yeah,
right?
Definitely. My kind of story about this is, back when the Xbox One came out, because I'm a big old gamer, I like to have all the consoles, and I bought a PS4 at launch, but then, because it seemed more interesting at the time, but I'd loved the PlayStation, the Xbox 360. That was probably my biggest console back then. And then the one finally came out, and not wildly later, I picked one up. I got the bundle that came with Assassin's Creed Unity. So if someone wants to look up when that game came out, that's when I got the Xbox One. And I got some games for it. I've got Halo 5, I guess. That was the game on it, and it wasn't great, but I don't think it's quite as bad as
2014.
Oh, there you go. Halo 5 wasn't great, but I don't think it deserves quite the amount of hate it sometimes get, but it wasn't incredible. It didn't blow me away by any stretch of the imagination. And mainly because I just had the console and I wanted to buy things for it, so it wasn't like a waste of money. I would buy like some multi-format games on it. And then Quantum Break came out, which is a Remedy game, which wasn't bad. I'd recommend it if it wasn't unfortunately owned by Microsoft, so is therefore under BDS. But that had a weird thing. Part of the whole deal with the Xbox One was that it was also about television, and this only really worked in America. You could run a cable box through it, so you could watch all your cabled shows on through the Xbox One, and that had some benefits in some way. I guess there was a certain amount of like integrating it all together. I didn't have a digital encoder for my TV at the time, because that's how long ago this was. And I bought a box that they put out for the Xbox One that would essentially do the same thing, but with digital TV for us. And I used it a little bit. But then I got this Quantum Break game, and the whole thing with it, because they were exploring television, was that Microsoft had mandated that they also had these like essentially short episodes of TV between levels that you had to sit and watch, and they like changed slightly based on decisions you made in the game. It wasn't very good, that element of it. But when I was watching this, I realized it was incredibly low quality, because they actually streamed in all the video off the internet. And I realized that the console was actually broken. The Ethernet port had failed, and I have terrible Wi-Fi in my house. It's bad reception. So basically, after that, I kind of gave up on that game, and I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to give up on the Xbox for now. When a game comes out that I've got to play, and this is like after like 1 or 2 years of the console being out, when a game comes out that I've got to play, I'll sort this in some way. I'll either send off for it to get it fixed or something, or maybe by then I'll buy the slimline version of the console or something. I didn't even announce the Xbox One X at that point. Maybe I would have bought that. But I went the entire generation and they just never put out a game that was worth it. It just never happened. They didn't put out another Halo game. They put out some Gears of War games, which felt and looked incredibly dated. Another issue is that it feels like Microsoft is just stuck in the 2010s or the 2000s even, just making these games that are like basically bald Space Marine games that are made for like teenage boys from 2009. And it's just like, they're still doing that. And maybe they did other things that'd be right, but it feels like that's almost everything they make. And so I went an entire generation and I just never bought another Xbox game. And I didn't play any of those games that did come out, the ones I had some interest in, until the Xbox Series X came out. And I could go back and play a bunch of them because it was compatible. But the fact, I wouldn't have believed if you told me back when that thing happened to the Ethernet port that I would not have played another game on my Xbox One. Of course they're going to put out something. And they just went so long. And I just think there's been a devaluing of the basic business model of console games, that you make games that people want to buy that are exclusive to your platform. And that means you have to buy the platform. And it just seems bizarre to me that so many people have just kind of abandoned this, even though I haven't seen any real evidence that it doesn't work. And I just think by putting all their games multi-platform, they have made it so that as well. I mean, even if BDS wasn't happening, I doubt I'd buy whatever the next Xbox is, because they announced last year that Halo, the new Halo game, or that it's the Halo 1 remake, is going to be day one on the PlayStation. So if Halo is going to be multi-format, that means everything's going to be multi-format. There are no, exclusive games anymore. So why would I even buy an Xbox? Everything they make was going to come out on PlayStation. What's the point? It just seems bizarre to me. And like Nintendo, they keep making their games, and you can only play their games on Nintendo systems, and they are good games. And Nintendo systems sell really well. It just seems bizarre to me that everyone's just decided that this business model doesn't work when we have pretty good evidence that it does work. It just seems like it's incredibly, and Sony's doing this to a lesser extent as well. It seems incredibly short-sighted that they're like, well, if I make this game, I can sell more if it's on other platforms as well. And maybe that's true once or twice, but if you keep doing it, no one will buy your platform. And that seems to me to be what's happened.
I think the thing that we're maybe missing by thinking it's bizarre is forgetting that capitalism isn't about making a profit. Capitalism is about making the maximum profit, the maximum return. Yeah. I think, a theory that people have is that in 2023, after a lot of 2022 actually, after a lot of back and forth, Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard, which is by far the biggest acquisition Microsoft, not Xbox, Microsoft have ever made. It was $75 billion US dollars, which is about triple their next biggest acquisition. And so the thing that people were saying is that immediately puts a huge amount of pressure on the video games portion of Microsoft. And it's around that time when we start seeing the shift completely away from trying to make the Xbox a viable ecosystem, and basically a soft transition away from that to just being the people that own several game studios that make big games. And I think there possibly is something in that. I think they've just decided that because with a lot of games consoles, the console itself is not necessarily profitable. It's sold for a loss to get you into the ecosystem. So I think maybe they've looked at that and they've decided that's not a business model that they really fuck with anymore. And they'd probably be more profitable, although maybe they'll make less money but still make greater profits if they scrap out the whole middleman bit of the console and only make consoles perhaps that are themselves profitable, which is what we've discussed in previous episodes. Is it seems like might be what they're going to do. They might be going to sell very expensive they've described the next Xbox as, quote, a premium device. And so that seems, and obviously the ROG Xbox Ally X came out I don't know how much it costs in the UK because I don't know anyone that's got one. But famously in the US, it was $1,000, which
$1,000
is for about the price of a Switch 2 and like a Steam Deck OLED together. Like you could have bought both of those consoles rather than a sort of shitty way of playing. Anyway, so I think it seems like a very deliberate shift away from the console and just to become a publisher. They've bought out so many existing games and game studios. They own quite a large amount of the industry now. They own, Minecraft's one of the biggest games of the last 20 years. They own that. They didn't make it. They just bought it. Bethesda put out Fallout. They put out Elder Scrolls. Again, Microsoft didn't make any of those games. They've just bought the rights to sell them and make money off of them. And I think that's the strategy. I think that will probably be more profitable for them, but at the cost of it's not going to be good for the games industry to only have one competitor in the like straightforward gaming space. I think it's probably going to be good for Microsoft profits in the short to medium term, and it's going to be bad for us all, apart from Microsoft, as with many big decisions that big companies make. So I've got it's basically the same kind of take, but with a slightly different angle on it there, I think.
I mean, I basically agree. I mean, the real issue, I think, is short-termism, and that is just a symptom of late-stage capitalism, right? It's them desperately wringing every penny they can possibly get out of it without any regard for whether that's sustainable or whatever. Yeah, so I mean, I basically agree.
Yeah.
All right. I think we solved it. We did it.
Variously danced / cried at the grave of Xbox.
Yeah. I don't know. Just I just find it so, because the thing is, they haven't even been made. It's not like they've been on the money train ever since they've dropped out of console shit. They've like not been doing well. I mean, it's worth saying, Call of Duty, by all standards, has done very badly this year. I think it may have. I'm not entirely sure what the final numbers were. It may have just pipped being the best-selling game of the year again. But it has sold way less than it previous, and it is widely regarded to be a very bad version of Call of Duty. I mean, we haven't really looked into it because of BDS, but it's done very poorly. And as I mentioned before, Battlefield 6, which actually I got for cheap in the New Year's sales, so I will probably be talking about that soon because that seems like that would be good, some interesting politics, and it's not under BDS, so that'll be fun. But that seems to be like pretty much everyone. That's on the upswing, and Call of Duty is way on the downswing. So the one thing they basically bought Activision for, even that's failing. It's just, unbelievable failure of basic management. And, I don't want to give Nintendo too much props because they're also a big corporation that's done plenty of bad shit. But I do respect them for just having more of a long-termist viewpoint, that they made Mario games and these kind of quote-unquote kiddie games back in like the 90s when most of their audience were children. And then the audience grew up and they became teenagers and like young adults, and they didn't want to play these cutesy games anymore. They wanted to play board Space Marine games. And that's when Microsoft kind of made their money. But then Nintendo just kept with it. And eventually we got to the point where the audience kind of grew up to the point where, one, they're not so self-conscious about playing a kind of kiddie style game, and two, they're having their own children who they want to introduce these games to. And now Nintendo just prints money out of fucking Mario's mouth because they just stuck with it. If Microsoft had like stuck with their games and a range of kind of games, and they'd evolved them with the audience, like say Sony did with like God of War, which was this incredibly kind of teenage adolescent game, and then they made it a dad game. You can like those as artistic moves or not, but they at least show like they're catering to a different audience over time. Whereas Microsoft's just like, hey, do you want to play Gears of War again? A game that feels unbelievably dated and just stuck in the year 2010 or something. I feel like it peaked creatively with that Mad World advert and never did much beyond that, Anyway, I think we're probably done talking about Xbox, and that means we're done for the episode. We're really done. It's over. You can go back to your lives somehow. I don't know if you'll be able to cope, but we should be back in 2 weeks' time. We're back on the 2-week schedule, hopefully. All fingers crossed. I would remind everyone that we do this for free. So please, cut us some slack with the schedule sometimes.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I'm saying that. We had a pretty reasonable cause to skip one with Christmas. But we would beg you, as always, please share us on social media, and also just tell your friends. If you know people, if you're friends with some comrades and into games, even if they're not that much comrades, but you want them to be comrades, just throw them our podcast. Throw it to them. Literally, put it on an SD card or something and throw it directly in their face as hard as you can. They will not be able to avoid it. If you want to get really hardcore with it, find an old iPod from the 2010s. We've been talking about that then. And just throw an iPod directly in their face with our podcast on it.
Right.
I think we'd all agree that would be the best course of action. But
it'd be hard to deny it.
Beyond that, you can also, as I said, just share us on social media. On Twitter, we are at Red Barrels Pod. On Blue Sky, we are at Red Barrels Podcast.bsky.social. Personally, you can find me at Alex Dean, ALEXDUIN. And that's on Twitter. And on Blue Sky, at alexdean.bsky.social. Ed, how can people find you?
You can find me at Not a Lemon on Blue Sky or at Still Not a Lemon on X. Sophie?
You can find me mostly on Twitch. I stream 3 days a week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, although that schedule is changing soon. You can catch me there, twitch.tv/Sofie.
Yes, Sophie, I because I've been away, I've missed some streams. Have you finished Claire Obscure yet? Clobbers? Nope. Well, seeing Sophie finish Clobbers is going to be...
I've been busy.
I'm not criticizing you.
I've started playing Clobbers, Sophie.
I'm welcoming our listeners to see you finish it. They haven't missed it.
Yeah.
As long as they listen to this immediately.
Yeah, join for my stream. You might watch me finish Clobbers.
Exactly.
I've been affectionately calling it Clobbers, for those of you who don't know.
It's all Clobbers. We did say Claire Obscure first, didn't we? Did we just say that?
Maybe we can cover it on the same episode.
Maybe we can. Maybe we shouldn't be making promises we may not technically keep, so I'm probably going to cut that from the podcast. But in general, I agree with you. But yes, check out Sophie's stream. But until then, in a moment, you'll be hearing the amazing music from Brilliant Drink that you heard at the beginning. Can't forget about that. But until then, we will be saying goodbye.
Bye.